CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out Cyber Ears. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. Cyber Ears, your audio, your terms.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome, CoCo Cruisers. You are listening to episode 27 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. One of your hosts, John Linville. I am joined by my two regular compatriots, Neil Blanchard. Say hello, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And the lovely and talented Myro, or Mike Rowan. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
All right. How is everyone doing? We are proceeding through the year, fast approaching Tandy Assembly, getting closer to the next CoCo Fest as well. The next CoCo Fest is now, 8 months away?
Wow.
And, of course, Tandy Assembly, or by the time you listen to this at least, will be about 1 month away, getting very close. Are you guys excited?
Yeah, I'm very excited, but time is going too fast.
We'll be busy for the next month.
Yeah.
It always does. Get to be, it goes from taking too long to not taking quite long enough.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
what are you guys working on these days? Besides Tandy Assembly planning?
I'm trying to get into a project, but between Tandy Assembly and the podcast, I'm kind of in between. I was looking at doing a run of word packs. Came in a roadblock with the cases, though.
Yeah. Well, you need to save a little construction time because I think we're going to be applying you to build some bomb threat cartridges.
Sounds good.
For to be revealed at Tandy Assembly.
Awesome.
How about you, Mike? What you doing?
I have not. I've been doing Tandy Assembly. That's about it. Been pretty busy with the work stuff, and I got some vacation up though, so I'm going to be working on my display for Tandy Assembly. So hopefully that'll be nice.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, I keep trying to find that pill to stop time or whatever to code up some new stuff for Tandy Assembly. I don't think I'm going to make it. I have at least gotten back to my blog with a few technical entries that I'm hoping to get some double duty out of for tech segments here on the podcast. Stuff. Well, doing some of the prep work for those bomb threat cartridges. But life goes on, right? There's always going to be the CoCo Fest for projects beyond Tandy Assembly, and hopefully beyond that, Tandy Assembly for projects beyond CoCo Fest, right?
Yes. Never ending. We'll never run out.
Yeah, well, I'll be completely busy for the rest of our lives. I'm not sure that sounds so great, but maybe it's not so bad.
No, that's what makes it a great hobby.
So, speaking of the great hobby, the true source of my hobby, I think sometimes is eBay. You guys pick up anything new or interesting lately?
I haven't picked up anything really Tandy related, but I did finally get an EEPROM burner, so that's exciting.
Yeah? Awesome.
That's cool. So now I can ship you fewer EPROMs and just ship you an image and let you burn them.
That's it.
Good
Awesome.
deal.
Anything new lately?
I picked up a kind of an interesting item off of eBay. It was a shooting gallery cartridge, and I thought, it was only like $4 or something, and but it had this really intriguing edge card connector sticking out of the cartridge, and I knew that was non-standard. Yeah. It also had a cable with 2 connectors on it, and so I picked that up, and when I got it, sure enough, it's just a repurposed cartridge. It's not the shooting gallery at all, but it had it's basically a Y adapter. So you plug the cartridge in, and then it's got a cable with 2 connectors to connect, 2 other cartridges. So kind of a neat find. Cool. The board was made in 1984, and but it's funny because they did ship the manual for shooting gallery with the cartridge. So I've got that.
That should be real helpful.
Yeah. That's funny.
Must have been an estate find. Somebody obviously wasn't aware of what it was. So.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Interesting they kept the manual.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just in a pile somewhere, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, CoCo related, or at least not yet. But I did pick up a Gameboy printer and a Gameboy camera, which is the Gameboy printer is it's a thermal printer that prints on 1.5 inch wide paper, and of course it's useful with a Nintendo Game Boy. The Game Boy camera is a really low-res camera. It does what's grayscale, 2-bit grayscale. Anyway, I just kind of got it to toy around. I already had some Game Boy stuff or whatever, but the paper that came with it was kind of old, and so it didn't print very well. And somewhere, either I found something that told him that, you could test it with just any old receipt, and up to be the right size to roll through the printer, and then he started splicing them together, and before long he had a whole manufacturing line putting together paper for the Game Boy printer. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It could lead to be a CoCo project because the printer protocol there is not too complicated. It requires a little bit of hardware to be able to communicate with the CoCo, but together. So that might be something to talk about in the future.
Very cool.
Something else I picked up. Somebody was selling CoCo software discs that were originals, and so along with some of the Tandy titles, there were also a couple of more rare titles, like there was Marty's Nightmare was in there, and there's another Steve Bjork game or whatever, and I think there was a Rupert Rhythm in one of the collections. No docks with them, just the bare disc, but they were not too expensive, so I kind of picked up a couple of those packs, and I haven't had a chance to actually run them through a CoCo disc yet to see if they work, but we'll see.
They're pretty tough. I bet they do.
Yeah,
they're pretty good.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll talk about, I did pick up a Tandy 1000 HX, which is the Tandy 1000 that kind of looks like a CoCo on steroids. So I figure if I'm going to be outreaching our arms to our Tandy brethren at Tandy Assembly, I need to, expand my T1K collection a little bit.
So, very cool. We'll have to get those adapters built now.
Yeah, exactly.
We get a hard drive interface on there.
Just hope it actually works when it gets here. That's the big problem sometimes when you buy from eBay.
Well, those things are pretty strong too. They're, Tandy, that stuff's bulletproof.
A drive wire server.
Yeah, that could be cool. Or maybe a host for an EEPROM programmer. I always thought that would be kind of cool. But anyway, well, that's probably enough to get us warmed up. So we're going to take a little break here, as I think Neil likes to say, take a pause for the cause, and we'll be back with the rest of the show.
After these messages.
is.
We'll be right back.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, CoCo VGA, creator of the FPGA-based hardware enhancement for Motorola 6847 VDG-based microcomputers, such as the TRS-80 color computer. CoCo VGA adds VGA output to early model CoCos. It adds true lowercase, multiple artifact modes, scanline emulation, and a customizable palette in addition to other features. For more details about CoCo VGA, visit www.cocovga.com. Thank you to CoCo VGA for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
Every day, a color computer is abandoned or abused. They live in the dark recesses of garages, basements, storage sheds, barns, and attics, waiting for someone to help. Hi, I'm Helen Bleeding Heart. Please say you'll be the answer for CoCo suffering the effects of extreme temperature, overexposure to ultraviolet light, and conditions unfit for electronics. These CoCos need your help. Please call 888-6883 or go online and join the Color Computer Preservation Society with a monthly gift right now. For just $18 a month, you can rescue CoCos from their abusive environments, provide repair of damaged parts, administer retro bright treatments, and most of all, provide love. Call or sign up online in the next 30 minutes, and we'll send you a photo of a CoCo being lovingly reconditioned by the CCPS. And you'll receive this beautiful tote bag that declares, I saved a CoCo. Yours for your generous, perpetual monthly gift. This is your chance to say, I won't sit by while a CoCo is wasting away. Please, won't you call or go online right now?
All right, welcome back. Now we'll have some announcements. You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available through Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast, all one. So if you like to tweet or whatever, and see if we ever tweet back, then we are available. We are also available with a page on Facebook. Just search for the CoCo Crew Podcast with, of course, spaces between all the words because, that's just how we roll. The podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, and also available for streaming through Stitcher and TuneIn. Hopefully those are enough to satisfy your your quest for finding the show. Of course, if you're going to subscribe to the show, you subscribe through the CoCoCrew.org RSS feed. That way, in case we ever have to change providers, you can just follow along with us. Anyway, we are also a member of the Throwback Network. This is a collection of retro-themed podcasts, many oriented, some of which are not. It's all kind of centered around the 80s culture one way or another. So if you're looking for another podcast to fill some of your day, then I recommend you check out the Throwback Network. Similarly, we are listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This also is a list of similarly themed podcasts. In this case, all technology related, old home computers and retro video game consoles, that sort of thing. And again, if you're seeking another podcast, do check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is, of course, hosted at Cyber Ears. Should you need to host audio on the internet, then we recommend that you check out Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. Should you wish to reach the CoCo Crew by email, we have a number of addresses set up to reach all of the hosts. This includes show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, podcast, PODCAST, at CoCoCrew.org, and feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. Should you wish to reach one of the hosts individually, we also have available John at CoCoCrew.org, that's JOHN, which of course reaches me. Neil, Neil, at CoCoCrew.org, which of course reaches Neil. And Mike, Mike, at CoCoCrew.org, and I'll just let you guess who that one reaches. That is our standard set of announcements, but as always, we like to cover announcements of some shows or other events that we think our listeners may be interested in. First up this time is VCF Midwest 12. That'll be September 9th and 10th of 2017 at Elk Grove Village, Illinois. This is a general retro computing event. You'll see a variety of machines represented, including Commodore and, usually the Glenside folks are there representing the CoCo, and there'll be Apples and Ataris and probably even stranger stuff. So we've all been to this event. I think we rate it pretty highly. So, if you're in the Chicago area there for September 9th and 10th, then I recommend Grove Village for VCF Midwest 12.
I know I'm going to be.
I will too. Yep.
Good. For those not in the Chicago area on September 9th, if you happen to be closer to New Jersey on September 9th, there is the Atari Party East 2017 being hosted in Somerset, New Jersey on that Saturday, September 9th. This is Come Celebrate Everything Atari at the initial Atari Party East, encompassing all the products that made Atari an amazing company: arcade video game machines, pinball, consoles, computers, and even Atari Soft. Have you played Atari today? So, again, this is a first-time event. I've heard a lot of praise for Atari Party, which is on the West Coast. So hopefully this will be a cool event. If you go, let us know how it turns out.
Sounds like a good one.
Yep, I think it'll be cool. Of course, coming up in October, of course, October 7th and 8th, 2017 in Chillicothe. Tandy Assembly is now taking pre-registrations. You can pay in advance and avoid the long line at the door. Registration is $10 per attendee. Children 12 and under are free. All proceeds pay for the cost of running the event. So come on, hang out with us. Bring your Tandy stuff, fly your Tandy flag, show your Tandy pride. Whether you're a Z80 user, CoCo, MC10, pocket computer, or even a Tandy 1000 guy, come on, hang out with us, spend the weekend, relive some of your past, show us what you do with your Tandy today. It'll be a great event.
I'm going to that one too.
Yeah. Mike's going to that one too.
I think I'll be there too.
Yeah, I think I'll be too. My wife's even going to come. I have to be nice, I guess.
Oh, that's good. Mine will be there too. You can call her Joe Rowe.
Joe Rowe. That'll catch on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing is, you guys both bringing your wives down there. I'm not going to be able to, bunk with one of you. I'm on my own.
Oh, well, sorry.
Oh, we'll talk offline.
Poor guy. All right. Coming up next, this one I just found out about. November 17th through 19th, and the 19th is my birthday. Free Play Florida 2017. Free Play Florida 2017 is an exciting 3-day event that encompasses a complete pinball, arcade, and console gaming experience. This November 17th through the 19th, Free Play Florida is being held at the beautiful Doubletree SeaWorld by Hilton, right off I-4 and International Drive. I guess that's in Orlando.
Nice.
All of your classic and current pinball and arcade games will be on display for you to play. Join the International Flipper Pinball Association sanctioned pinball tournament and compete with the best in the state of Florida. Sit in on our speaker panels that include industry icons and visit our valued vendors selling parts, memorabilia, and some of the coolest themed art on the planet. So, sounds like a cool event.
Yeah, sounds a lot like the Southern Fried Game Room, and that was a blast.
Yeah. So, So, yeah, I may have to figure out how to get down there for my birthday. That might be cool.
Yeah, it's a good birthday gift.
Time of year to be in Florida.
Oh. All right, coming up December 2nd and 3rd of 2017, I think I had to correct those dates. World of Commodore. I think the link still mostly points to World of Commodore for 2016, but hopefully those guys will get their stuff updated before long. But
yeah.
Anyway, World of Commodore. Neil, you're the one that knows about this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a good event. It's close to my house, so that's a bonus for me. But no, there's always a great group of people down there.
And that's in Toronto?
Yeah, it's not quite in Toronto. It's kind of like Mississauga area, but a little easier to get to. Right off the service road. Yeah, it's a well mixed event too. Cool. I mean, it's not just Commodore computers there, like I was saying before. I mean, it's obviously heavily Commodore presence, but you'll see other machines as well.
Yeah. Okay. So they mix it up a little. All right. Well, moving on. That actually gets us through the end of the year. The first event I have for 2018, VCF Pacific Northwest, February 10th through 11th of 2018. This is going to be held at the Living Computer Museum and Labs in Seattle, Washington. I believe that's the Paul Allen Museum, right? So should be a cool event. It's a VCF event. Professional organization running that. They are pretty professional these days, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, I highly recommend that you put this on your calendar and get to Seattle in February. Should be a cool event. If you go, let us know. All right. That brings us down to what has been the big event on our calendar. It remains one of the big events on our calendar. 27th annual Last Chicago CoCo Fest, April 21st and 22nd, 2018. This will be held at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. Come and touch the heron.
Yeah.
It's a cool event. It looks like this is their still continuing largely in the traditions that have been set up the past couple of years, which would include a Saturday night meal on site, catered in. And let's see. Tickets at the door for the entire 2-day event are $15 for the first family member, $5 for the second, and beyond. Sunday only tickets are $10 for the first family member, and still $5 for the second and beyond. Children aged 12 and under are admitted for free. So come and check out the CoCo Fest and see why it's lasted for 27 years. It is a great event, lots of camaraderie. It's a good community overall. Always fun to be at the auction and maybe pick up some rarities. Very cool. You guys going to CoCo Fest?
I'm thinking about it. Yeah, of course. I will be there.
Yeah, definitely.
We make it rain or shine.
If I'm not there, I'm dead or in jail.
That about sums it up.
I'm sure they've forgotten about the charges from last year, so it should be fine.
We can't forget about CoCo Fest. It's where we met each other.
That's right.
Yep, CoCo Fest is a great event.
It brought us all together.
All right, one more event on the calendar: Kansas Fest 2018. I've got it down as the 16th through the 22nd. I think their website says 17th through 22nd, but you actually can arrive on the 16th and stay over in the dorm. No presentations or activities, but like most of these events, Kansas Fest, just like CoCo Fest, and probably just like Tandy Assembly and a few others, is going to be about the people. So show up on the 16th for Kansas Fest and enjoy the people an extra day. For those that are unaware, somehow have been under a rock, the Kansas Fest, of course, is an Apple II event held in the dorms at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. It's a lengthy event, 5 days of retro talks and festivities, and real cool stuff. I'm not sure they're going to have the big garage giveaway anymore. I think this year may have been the last one on the schedule for that, but so it may not be the opportunity to pick up free Apple II gear anymore, but it'll still be a good place to go and learn about what you already have. So
yeah, and you better get in early because they're capping that event. So
yep, they filled up this past year. We'll see how it goes next year and future years, but like I said, it's a cool event. I went a couple of years ago. I'd like to think I'll go again, but we'll see how it turns out.
I'd like to mention one thing about Tandy Assembly, since this will be playing at the end of August. Everyone should be aware that the cutoff for the special room rate for Tandy Assembly is September 5th. So if you haven't booked a room for Tandy Assembly, book before September 5th, or you won't get the special rate.
Definitely. In fact, I still need to book mine.
Yeah, same here.
We all better get on that because it's coming soon. All right. Well, so that brings us to the end of our announcements, and we're going to take another pause for the cause, and we'll be back with some news.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? The original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I'm the host of CoCo Talk. What is CoCo Talk, you ask? Well, we are a weekly live talk show on YouTube featuring the Tandy Color computer. And guess what? CoCo Talk is now also available as an audio podcast for your listening pleasure. So when you are done listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, come check us out at cocotalk.live for weekly live talk featuring the Tandy Color computer. We'll see you there, CoCo Cruisers.
Fort Knox. More than 5,000 tons of precious metal lie behind a 22-ton vault door. The walls are concrete-lined granite. There are armed guards, fences, tanks, and Apache helicopters to deter any unwanted entry. Stealing gold from Fort Knox is virtually impossible. But how do you protect toilet paper? Color Outhouse, an outrageous game for the Tandy Color computer. Thieves are sneaking into your outhouse to steal toilet paper. You must protect your outhouse from above in your very own flying saucer. Keeping these tissue bandits at bay is only part of the problem. The sky is filled with other deadly unfriendlies. Do you have the skill to keep your rolls intact? Color Outhouse. Distributed by Computer Shack. 32K required. Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, The Right Stuff, producer of myriad products for the TRS-80 Models 1, 3, 4, Model 100, and Color Computer. The Fred Hard Drive Emulator, high-res graphics boards, memory upgrade kits, cables, adapters, and more. To see these and other products, visit ianmav, that's IANMAV, .customer.netspace.net.au/TRS-80. Thank you to The Right Stuff for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right, CoCo Crews, welcome back. Now it's time to start the news. Our first item is from Jim Gary. Jim has got a map maker for Caves of the Unwashed Heathen. So I guess in previous episodes we've done some reporting where Jim had done a port of Caves of, which was a CoCo game, an adventure-style game, and he's got to the MC10. And so now he's got a program that I guess helps you make maps, which are always useful for trying to solve adventure games. So if you're playing Caves of the Unwashed Heathen, you may want to check out what Jim's got, and maybe you can set up the MC10 running the map maker next to your CoCo running the game, or vice versa, or who knows, might be useful, might be fun. What do you think?
Yeah, kind of cool.
All right. So here's one that a news item. It's not CoCo specific, but we have some similar items here. Flash carts could be slowly killing your retro consoles. Damien McFerrin, writing for Nintendo Life. And I guess the culprit here is a conversion of signals between 5 volts and 3.3 volts, which I guess is they're thinking that it's just draining the power supply, or is this about excess heat? I don't know.
Like excess heat was their main worry.
Yeah. Well, read it and see what you think. That is kind of an issue when it comes to trying to use up-to-date hardware or more modern hardware that runs on 3.3 volts, and trying to use that in CoCo peripherals where the CoCo is really a 5-volt system. You have signals, and at some point something's got to give. Now, I don't know how big a deal this really is, but these systems aren't going to last forever. So I don't know. Real tempted here to plug my period correct hardware that I use in my game cartridges, but I'll resist that. All right. So moving on, we have a post from Rick Adams, who of course was the author of Shanghai, as well as Temple of Ram. And the recent auction off some diskettes that contain some of the Shanghai sources, but not before copying those sources off to a more modern machine. And he's now made those sources available for download. I don't know if these are enough to build the whole game from scratch or not. If you're interested, go check them out. The main deal seems to be check it out and see if you can find interesting or snarky comments.
I was just thinking that.
So anyway, you might go check out that, see if that provides some entertainment for you. All right. Other than that, reading assembly language source code, it can be entertaining or it can be educational. But for most people, it'll probably be neither, and it certainly won't be all that entertaining for the for the average soul. But some people might enjoy it. All right. The next link comes from Carlos Camacho. He posted. We posted to Facebook. I guess he had a link out to eBay, but he had a couple of the old black style joysticks for the CoCo, and he had modded them to have a button on top, I guess, that you can hit with your thumb rather than using the button in the front that you could hit with your index finger, I guess. And so, it's kind of you may like it, you might not, but included here just to show that, you can do little projects like that and make little modifications, especially if you want to start hardware hacking on the CoCo. Starting at the joysticks is probably the safest place to be, and in some ways the easiest place to be. So I encourage you, especially those terrible little black joysticks. I don't see quite as many of them as I used to. I don't know if they rage on them or what, but I don't know. They're kind of horrible to use for most things, although maybe if you're going to play double back or a couple other things they might be useful for. But anyway, so cool project idea from Carlos. So. All right, moving on. The next one is a tweet that comes from Osh Park, or people say OSH Park. That's a kind of a rapid prototyping a PCB manufacturer. So their tweet says, want to try a 2-layer flex PCB? We're looking for a variety of designs to test. Please email us with flex in the subject, support@oshpark.com. So, why do I include this? Well, a flex PCB is, exactly the kind of thing like the Mylars that people talk about being inside of some of the CoCo keyboards, or I guess all of the CoCo keyboards. And so from time to time it comes up, well, my keyboard's worn out. How can we ever replace it? Well, I don't know. Somebody needs to design a flex PCB. Well, here you go. You might be able to do so through OSH Park or Osh Park, rather than having to go through some sort of specialty PCB manufacturer. So, So there you go. If you're an aspiring circuit layout designer, or if you want to repair your CoCo keyboard, get out to KiCad or Eagle or whatever and start laying it out. Pretty soon you might be able to get them done at Osh Park.
That's cool.
What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, that's very cool. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Okay, so the next link's a little sad. It's a Facebook link and into a picture, and you see an old building on fire. And so it's Save the Machine Computer Preservation Group. It's with a heavy heart. We were reporting a nearly total loss of most of our amazing collection. So this is a little group up in it's in the more rural part of North Carolina, so kind of within driving distance from here. But they had a fire, and they had space set aside in an old mill or factory or something. And they had I know they had a maker space, and they had this computer preservation kind of museum in there, and I think they had some similar other kind of arts and crafts or whatever. In fact, I think Matt Witt said he was a member of some of these organizations there, and that he had parked some of his motorcycle collection or something there, and that he lost some of those. So they must have had a lot of stuff in that building. And it sounds like the fire took the whole building, basically a total loss. So sad news. I think we might have a little discussion based on this later in the show. But so if you have a similar, these a lot of places have like maker spaces or whatever that have been set up in buildings that are basically on the verge of derelict because the rent is cheap or whatever. But sometimes old buildings can be fire hazards or whatever, and exactly what happened here, but just in a general sense it could happen, and you may want to watch out for that. So forewarned is for something. Anyway.
Yeah, just
there's a saying in there. Yeah, it is terrible for to think that so much of the stuff was lost and whatever, but some of it obviously irreplaceable. No humans were damaged in the making of this tragedy, though, so that is at least good to report. So, all right. So moving on, we have a link, update Android loader, or updated, I guess, Android loader V101-220717, which I think was a really loader. So this is an Android program used with the Dragon, and they have a bunch of titles available so that you can use your Android phone as a replacement for a cassette deck for loading code to your Dragon. I think a lot of the Dragon software catalog, shall we say, was available on cassette to begin with, maybe more so than what was available even for the CoCo. And so this is a cool little collection if you're into the Dragon side of things. I keep hoping that somebody will take up join Chris Poacher and produce a CoCo version of this. I think that would be really cool. But anyway, for now, as far as I know, it's just Dragon stuff. So some of the Dragon stuff will load and run on a CoCo, but some of it, most of it, or a lot of it will, of course, the keyboard will be messed up. Anyway, if you're looking, if you like to play with your Dragon and have an Android phone, it's a cool project. You should look into it. All right, another Jim Geary game, The Search for Sherlock Holmes. I think this is also a text adventure. Is that right? And Sherlock Holmes theme. Well, not much to say other than, good work, Jim. The guy's tireless. I wish I had the energy, don't you?
Yeah,
definitely.
All I need is energy, time, and talent.
Yeah, exactly. Pick two, right?
You can't always have all three, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we take a short little break, play some entertaining messages, and we'll be back with some more news.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, Retro Innovations. Retro Innovations is a producer and designer of Tandy color computer and general system products. Producer of the CoCo Flash Multi-ROM Emulator. The CoCo Flash offers 8 megabytes of ROM storage and supports large ROM images. It also includes a built-in Orchestra 90 compatible music synthesizer. For more details on this product and others, visit www.goforretro.com. That's www.go4retro.com. Thank you, Retro Innovations, for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
Make your Tandy color computer more versatile with great additions from RadioShack. The Tandy multi-pack interface is just $99.95 and allows you to connect up to 4 program pack cartridges. Easily change between the 4 slots using the front panel switch or switch slots under software control. How about adding an 80-column adapter? Just plug in the WordPack RS cartridge to your color computer and attach a monochrome monitor. It generates crisp, clear 80-column text with true upper and lower case characters. And it's just $99.95. Find these and other great color computer products only at RadioShack, a Tandy company.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? Fan of the show, Stevie Stroh here, and you are listening to the greatest podcast in the history of the spoken word. I'm talking about none other than the CoCo Crew Podcast with your host, John Linville, Neil Blanchard, and Michael Rowan, a.k.a. Myro, and yes, it will catch on. Back to you, CoCo Crew.
All right, back with some more news. The next item comes from Jim Gary again. Jim's been on another little tear this month. This one is called Pharaohs Curse. And it is a text adventure style game. Let's see, he's got a blurb here by Tim Kuntz for the CoCo, ported to TRS-80 Microcolor Basic with minor updates. So there you go, Pharaoh's Curse. If you're an MC10 owner, you have more and more games to play every month, thanks to Jim Gary. The guy's a hero. All right, next item. From the Pixel Joint Forum, we've got the pixel art tutorial. So if you are interested in producing pixel art, which either for building retro computer games or just because you like the pixelated art form in and of itself, then you may want to check out this extensive web page with a lot of information about and doing keeping color count low, I guess, and picking palettes and
it's definitely
making
an interesting
your lines
read.
look right and whatever. There's a lot to it for sure. Anyway, if you're an aspiring pixel artist, definitely something to check out. Moving on, and this is not CoCo at all. It is for the Model 100. Excuse me. But I did think it was interesting. The link comes from Brian White, who I think is a CoCo person. I think I've seen that name in the CoCo group. In fact, I think he may have sent us some stuff in the past related to printers. So he may, in fact, be a listener. If so, hello, Brian. So he has printed a DIP 28 carrier. That's a DIP 28 is a chip package, particularly for a 28-pin ROM. And so in the Model 100 and its cousins had extension ROMs available that could do, they carried software, almost like little ROM packs, just in a different format. But they had these plastic carriers that you kind of would wrap the chip around or wrap around the chip or whatever. So the point being that you can't just take a chip and pop it in the bottom of your Model 100, or if you can, you'd have to be very careful, I guess. But instead, you put it in one of these chip carriers, and then you pop it in. It's more like a ROM cartridge. 3D printed. I don't know. I think everyone knows that I'm not a huge fan of 3D printing, but I don't want people to think that I hate it. So I included the link here saying, "Oh, you do cool stuff with your 3D printer. I'll recognize you." And of course, in this case, it's for a different machine, but still a cool project. So there you go.
Definitely a good application for 3D printing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so the next link comes from, well, I've never heard of this media outlet Twice. They are really, but they have a link. And even that, the link says it's by Twice staff. It says RadioShack brand will reportedly live on. According to Reuters, I guess I should have got the Reuters story. Sorry. According to Reuters, the buyer intends to license the brand back to General Wireless, the specially created unit formed by hedge fund Standard General during RadioShack's first bankruptcy. The RadioShack brand will live on after a family office already owed $23 million by the bankrupt U.S. electronics chain agreed to assume ownership of it, as no other buyers submitted better bids this week. Oh, whatever. Oh, there's a link at the bottom of this to the full story on Reuters. So there. I've included the Reuters link. You just have to go through this link to get it.
You didn't put a bid in there, John?
If they had owed me $23 million, I would have put in a bid too. But my Red Hat stock's not quite that valuable. I wish it was.
By the way, your confusion is that site is from rapper TW Ice.
That's funny. So anyway, so it sounds like RadioShack may live on. If you end up with a surviving RadioShack in your area, send us a note saying, yeah, we still got one, and tell us what it's like. They're pretty. I haven't seen one around here ever since the latest bankruptcy. So I think, I have no idea where they are these days, or if they're centralized or just spread out pretty far. Anyway, you guys got a RadioShack anywhere near you these days?
No, been gone for years near where I'm at. There's like 3 or 4 near where Tandy Assembly is, but I don't know if any of those survived. We'll have to find out in October, I guess. But the ones that do survive, I hope they shift from selling $4 capacitors.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, $4 is beyond my capacity.
And RadioShack in my area has been completely gone for years.
Yeah. Well, we know you Canadians. Yeah. Shipped out to. You probably replaced them with Tim Hortons or something.
Yeah, no doubt.
Dick Smith donuts.
Yeah.
Isn't that a UK thing?
Yes, Australia, I think. Yeah.
It's the Aussies.
Well, there you go. Speaking of Australia, our next news item is from Nick Morentis announcing the next part, Chapter 4 of, in which case he basically declares that none of the audio options that have been made available recently are good enough for him, and so he's going to just write an emulation of one of the other sound chips and use that. I don't know. He's going to do a sound tripping software, and then so right now he's working on basically a tracker style program to drive his sound chip emulation. So I don't know if you. He also misspelled my name in the blog post. So there's no D, Nick, if you're listening. No offense. Anyway. So, we all enjoyed the Popstar blog that as it rolled out for a while, and so now he's back with the Gunstar blog, and hopefully he'll continue to produce this good content. And even if he does, want to strike out on his own on the sound thing, hopefully that'll work out, and maybe he'll produce some new stuff, or at least document his sound routines in a way that makes for better code for everyone anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach for sure.
Yeah,
that is.
And always a fun blog to read.
I enjoy reading those blogs. The only my concern with that is that the CPU power. But hey, if he can pull it off, that would be great.
Yeah, I think he states in there that he's not going to use it for music in game. That he's using it for like bumper music or title music or whatever.
Okay, that makes sense.
He's going to stick to just sound effects in the game. So, and that's a valid choice. It's we've all been perfectly happy with that for quite some time. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. The next link is actually it's from Glenn Hewlett. And let's see, what is the title? Let's see,
Glenn,
color movie.
A little Canadian content here.
Yeah, color, and he misspells color, COLOUR.
I got to be honest, we're messed up with that word.
color movies with audio on the CoCo One using the artifact colors. Now, I'm not sure if we covered Ed Snyder's Players stuff that he's been doing. I'm not sure if we got that last month or not. I didn't see any links for it this month. Anyway, if we'd missed it somehow, I'm sorry, but the heads up is that Ed's been working on a system to basically embed player information or player code, I guess, into media files that get processed into a format that he's been describing. And that includes both audio players and video stuff. Now, I'm sure we covered his video players already previous to that. And so somewhere in the intersection of all those projects, Glenn has stepped in with a converter that for video to artifact color, NTSC artifact color mode. And he posts a link. And so, the link in the show notes is Facebook. And then the Facebook has a couple other links to YouTube videos. The YouTube videos, I think, are a little awkward to view because he rightly says, well, they look better if you stand back, and that's probably true. But so he videotapes them from across the room, which makes them a little hard to see because they're just down in the little corner of your video screen. Anyway, sorry, I didn't pick that up. Spill the beans. We're planning to talk to Glenn later in the show, but we recorded that interview long before. Didn't ask him about that video because we didn't know about it then. So anyway, so this is color video playback on the CoCo One using the NTSC color artifact colors. It's kind of cool. Check it out and see if you enjoy it. Okay, the next items from a Robert Allen Murphy. Does anyone know? I don't think I've ever seen his name before.
I don't think so either.
Might be new.
Yeah, it's kind of first for me as well.
So the link in the show notes is to a Facebook posting. And I think I saw maybe today a similar posting also about BBS software stuff. Not including that link in the news. Maybe it'll be in next month's news. But anyway, well, I managed to get the old Rainboard BBS from 1983 patched to 1984 with a Galactic Conquest online game running over Telnet. I even made some CoCo art for it. So he's running a BBS on an emulated CoCo 2, running Rainboard and some other software, including this Galactic thing. I don't know. He's got quite the stack he's describing here. MAME running on Fedora Linux. Is using Toolshed for building disk images. Somehow he's got XROR in the mix that he's used for some of his work. Anyway, if you want to check out a BBS hosted on a CoCo, as it may be, you may want to check out this link in the show notes and see if it takes you back home.
Yeah, I didn't. In the show notes, does that link have a link to the actual BBS? Because I didn't see that in the post. How you actually reach it?
I'm not 100% sure. Let's see.
Yeah, if it's Telnet, there should be a link.
Yeah. I'm not seeing Telnet either. So you may want to search around for for other posts from Robert Allen Murphy for further information. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that there was no link in this one. So anyway, so this link, your mileage may vary, but hopefully he'll keep posting.
Yeah, we'll have to reach out to him.
And on that lovely note, why don't we take another little break for some more announcements?
The beautiful Trinity River near Fort Worth. The clear aqua sky. The glistening of morning dew. And in the distance, the shimmering towers of Tandy Corporation. You're a man of taste, style, and distinction. It shows in the way you walk, in the way you work, in the computer that you use. That's why you deserve a beer that's just as refined. Coco Brow. Extra brewed in small batches with water from Fort Worth's sparkling Trinity River. Made from the finest ingredients. Coco Brow is always satisfying, full-bodied, full-flavored. One sip and you'll know why color computer users choose Coco Brow. Triple hopped and refiltered for purity. In a glass, the creamy head is the same color as a Coco tube. On tap or from a bottle. Shouldn't you be drinking a Coco Brow right now? Coco Brow. That's real good beer.
Tandy Brewing Incorporated, Fort Worth, Texas. Drink responsibly. Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, SIDTRUG, the Sydney TRS-80 MS-DOS Users Group, a group of computer enthusiasts meeting on a regular basis to discuss hardware and software issues. Their origins are with the Tandy TRS-80 and compatible System 80 range of computers. SIDTRUG meets at Regents Park Community Centre Hall, 1 Amy Street, Regents Park, New South Wales 2143. For more details about SIDTRUG, visit sidtrug.org. That's SYDTRUG.org. Thank you to SIDTRUG for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
What's going on, everybody? Mr. Gameplay Goodness himself, OG Stevie Stroh here, and I want to talk to you about our retro swag shop at 8bit256.com, featuring hand-drawn custom designs of vintage computing and retro gaming that you can get on a t-shirt, coffee mug, mouse pad, and more. You can even get a copy of one of my Gameplay Goodness DVDs there. So to get the I'm a Coconut t-shirt and all kinds of other cool retro swag, head on over to 8bit256.com.
Welcome back, Coco Cruisers, as we continue the news. The next link is another one of these free book links from the OSS blog. I think that's the source of the other free book links we've been having each month. Grasp Prologue programming with free books. So Prologue was a language used back in the day for artificial intelligence work, maybe still used for that. Logic programming in Prologue is one of the book titles, simply logical. So, should have a heavy emphasis in logic. Prologue and natural language analysis, that's more of an AI topic. Anyway, I don't know if there's a compiler or Prologue language has ever been available for the CoCo. I did Google around for Prologue 6809, and I got some hits, but nothing I could quite pin down. I was on Prologue out there for the CoCo, or at least for the 6809, but I can't find it. So it is an older language. It's good for your brain to learn new languages anyway. So, maybe you want to check it out. It's there. We've included similar links before, so I included this one. What do you think, Neil? You going to learn how to program in Prologue?
Oh, I want to learn assembly first. That's my goal this winter.
Assembly first. Oh yeah,
but that's definitely cool though.
I like on that link.
Right.
There's a GNU Prologue, so that's kind of cool.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you can at least program on your Linux machine or whatever at home, and there might even be Windows or Mac versions too.
Yeah, that's handy.
All right. Just stepping on to the next link, the sound illusion that helps make the movie Dunkirk so intense. Either of you guys see Dunkirk?
Yes, great film.
So yeah, not a bad film. The music in there is kind of puts you on edge a little bit. And I guess it turns out they're using a kind of a weird little trick. Let's see, does it tell you about the name of the trick in here? I thought it has a name. I'm having trouble finding it. Anyway, the basic idea is if you play 3 notes that are the right distance apart in terms of pitch, and play them in sort of an ascending scale, that even though the scale itself stops after 8 steps or whatever, it's the illusion of a scale that continues up forever. It's almost like an MC Escher kind of sketch translated to music. The one where you climb the steps and they just go around in a circle or a square and you're always climbing. So anyway, kind of a neat effect. If you've seen the music, it's kind of like there's kind of this dun, 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 and it just kind of, it feels like it goes on forever. Anyway, you might be able to turn that into a cool thing to put in a video game. That's why I included it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's kind of cool to learn some of these techniques, and a lot of them are perfectly applicable to a 30 or 40-year-old computer, just as much as they would be to a brand new one. And so if you're doing some composing for your latest video game in BASIC or 69 assembly, or if you find that 6809 Prolog compiler and write a game in it, maybe you can add some music to it that puts you on the edge of your seat as well. Anyway, sounded like a cool idea to me.
Definitely.
All right, here's a blog post from someone being a little philosophical. We may eventually borrow this topic for a discussion, but I don't think we're going to do it this month. But he says, game collecting, when is enough enough? And so he shows a bunch of shelves mounted on the wall full of what appear to be Sega games. But like Sega Genesis or whatever. But then he's got other pictures of games and more games and some more games, which I suspect looks a lot like the storage areas that many of us might use for our CoCo stuff or for our Tandy stuff or for our retro computing stuff in general. Mine is to the point where I don't publish pictures for fear of being, conscripted onto the Hoarders TV show. So if you're waxing a little philosophical, maybe you want to check out this link. When is enough? Game collecting. And so he talks about, should you set certain kind of goals? Do you collect, all the Mario games, or do you collect all the games for a certain system, or, is there a theme to your collection or something like that? It's probably a healthy thing to do, and it may be a good circuit breaker for some of us. It's easy to get a little compulsive about collecting stuff, some people more than others. And so sometimes it's nice if you have certain goals and you reach them. Sometimes that's a good check on you. It's like, well, okay, should I get any more stuff, or maybe I should stop for a while. The problem, of course, is when you get to be 80% to whatever goal you had, and then you decide, but it might be cool to collect those too. And then pretty soon you got 80% of that goal, and you pick up a third goal, and you got 80% of that one. So try not to do that, because that's a good way to, blow a bunch of cash on items of questionable importance, shall we say. Except your CoCo stuff, you need to have everything ever made by Tandy and all the third-party providers too.
Did you say something?
All right. Well,
yeah, I was just going to say, and then if you throw in there collecting variants, now that really gets crazy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going to redo all my cartridges with the labels off by 1/4 of an inch and see if I can sell those as variants. Oh, those were produced when I was drunk, you see. All right. So here's a link that Alan Huffman posted to the Color Computer Facebook group. Alan says Java on 8 bits. I missed out on this happening, and so his link is to it's a Boing Boing article, Java ported to Commodore 64. But then so John Strong proves that he's been listening to the podcast by posting as a comment the links to the Java Grinder app, including the CoCo port of Java Grinder from Michael Cohn that we had covered quite some time ago, at least a year ago on the podcast. But this is a new project, different project, although pretty similar in terms of capabilities and design and whatever. This is called Back to the Future Java, and it's a Java machine based on the code in this case actually comes from based on the Lejos JVM for the RCX brick, which the RCX was the first modern Lego Mindstorms. That's the yellow brick. It probably dates back 12 years or so now, maybe longer than that. Anyway, so it's a Java machine. Well, it's really a tool set more than anything that takes the .java files, the compiled Java files, and kind of compiles them down to assembly code, I guess, that gets linked in with well, I don't know if it compiles them to assembly code or not. It compiles them down to something that is usable by this virtual machine. That it's not quite a regular JVM, but it consumes the output of these Java tools, and it's like the biggest one is there's no garbage collector, which means if you allocate memory and don't deallocate it, then you eventually run out of memory, which is a little unusual position for an average Java programmer to be in. They don't normally have to free their memory. So now with that said, I don't think there's anything that you're likely to be able to pick up any existing Java code and suddenly put it on, in this case, your Commodore 64. This goes back to an old argument that when I found a kind of a precursor to the other Java virtual machine that we talked about, it's for writing new code in Java if you want to, but it's probably not going to help you much with existing Java code. Getting in it, that's not going to run on the CoCo anyway, because it's, most Java code out there is, does networking and whatever else. It's unrealistic to expect to run that on a CoCo. But if you want to write new code in Java for an 8-bit machine, this might be able to help you out. And if you're really talented and bored, maybe you can take this JVM and port it over till it targets the CoCo, similar to the way Michael Cohn's project targets the CoCo. And you'll probably get, similar results. So is that enough said?
Yeah, I think you covered it.
All right. I kind of got carried away. Sorry. All right. Let's see. So moving on. Let's see. MAME FTC issue that can cause corruption. This is from David Ladd. So David Ladd is taken to. Well, he does a lot of kind of strange things on the emulators, probably because it's just the emulators are more convenient for him to use. But he was trying to write floppy disks using odd numbers of sectors or unusual numbers of sectors and that sort of thing. And he was testing that on MAME and or Explorer or whatever. He found some problems that way. This one. It wasn't even doing anything all that weird, but he found an issue where you can cause corruption trying to use 2 drives on MAME at the same time on the CoCo emulation. And so it turns out somewhere not too long ago, there was an update to the FDC, the floppy drive controller code in MAME, which in MAME is shared by a number of systems that all use that same floppy drive controller chip or derivatives of it. And so the MAME gods made some sort of change that is supposed to make that a more accurate emulation, and probably it does. But in the process, it broke some of the assumptions that went into how the CoCo emulation was using it. And so what it amounts to is they on the CoCo, as I recall, the problem relates to that on the CoCo, when you turn on the drive motors, drives spin at once, and that's kind of helps with like copying back and forth between different floppy drives. But with the new emulation, somehow the drive motors were handled differently, and so the CoCo didn't get quite updated correctly for the new floppy drive emulation. And so basically, if you switch drives under the right circumstances, you'd get data from one drive show up as coming from another, and or get written back out to the others and causing corruption, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he encountered duplicate file names on the same disk too, so that'd be pretty gnarly.
Yes. Yeah. So David, I think, is working with the proper MAME developers to get this worked out. And I think he was pretty clearly trying to say he's not trying to pick or to cause problems or to say that one emulator is better than the other, that he's just, reporting bugs. And that's exactly what you should do, is you should report bugs. And if you're reporting bugs, certainly for MAME, you should expect that somebody's going to pay attention and get them fixed. And, really you should do that. You should expect that out of any project, and some will do better at it than others. So let me just leave it that way. All right. Moving on. This one kind of gives me the shivers a little bit, being an organizer for an event that's coming up. I'm hoping that since we are not practicing the same kind of karma as these guys were, that things will work out a lot better for us. Anyway, you probably remember for months we were talking about the Coleco Expo was a coming event. That's the Sophie Reynolds event that we made a lot of jokes about. And in fact, we kind of at one point were looking and said, "Wow, they're really charging a lot for their exhibitors." Whatever. So it turns out the event happened, and in the meantime, before the event had happened, the brilliant owners of the Coleco trademark now had kind of gone off and somehow or another had alienated themselves from the Coleco homebrew community, which has to be one of the stupidest things I've ever heard of. But I'm not going to go into the details of how that's happened, but if you follow the link to the Facebook page, then there's going to be a link there to the Atari Age forum. You can learn more about it. But it sounds like basically a bomb. It shows a lot of pictures of an essentially empty hall. It looks like a very big, very empty hall, so they must have laid down some coin to get access to the facilities that were then not utilized. I don't know. This just gives me the shivers. I sure hope Tandy Assembly looks better than this.
Yeah. Oh, it will, no doubt.
Sure it will.
Yeah. There's a lot of differences. I think in looking at this and how it bombed, especially being held in New Jersey, it's not like, there's not people there. You never, even though we saw the links, you never really got a feel for what the show was about. Was it about Cabbage Patch Kids? Was it about cosplay? Was it about video games? It didn't really fill in the blanks for you.
That's true. Well, I think they would have been happy for it to be about any of those things if you'd have just shown up.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, sad to see.
All right.
Sad to see.
It's definitely sad to see. Okay, well, so in maybe more positive news or better news or certainly more optimistic news, Steve Strobridge posted something to the Coco mailing list under the title "The Future of Coco Talk," and I think we may have mentioned Coco Talk here before that he's been having these weekly YouTube live events where he brings in a bunch of people and they talk about what's been going on in the Coco world for that week. And sometimes there's organized topics, and sometimes it's a lot more free form, and whatever. There's sort of some regular contributors, but always some new people, whatever. But it's been on YouTube, which is where Steve is had his background. But so now Steve's announcing that he's going to make the audio recordings of those YouTube videos. He's going to make them available as a podcast stream. He did talk to us beforehand, and so we weren't blindsided by this. Overall, I think it's a sign of strength in our community that we could support a second podcast. Look at the Commodore 64 community; they can barely support one. So
we're certainly doing better than Coleco.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, this the Coco Talk show, it has a very different feel to it than our show. It's kind of caters maybe not totally to a different audience, but maybe kind of a different perspective, or certainly a different kind of show. It's a lot more free form, a lot more man on the street, shall we say. And so, good luck, Steve. It's good to see some strength in the community. And, for speaking for myself, I like to be entertained. Nice for somebody else to put on a show. What do you guys think?
And the other thing to add in there, which is kind of cool, is, a little over 2 years ago, the Coco had no podcast. So, now there's two.
We've come a long way.
Yeah, definitely wish Steve success with it. It's good to keep expanding what's available to the community. Now we can waste even more time listening to Coco stuff.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, along with our 3 hours a month, you got his 2 or 3 hours a week. So
your commute just
no matter how long your drive time is. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, so there's one from Per Surratt. I haven't heard much from Per in a while. It seemed like we hadn't had as much Dragon coverage for a while. I don't know if that's my fault for not looking far enough abroad, or if maybe they stopped posting to Facebook or something. But anyway, so the title might be a little, anyway, the subject he posted, Orchestra 90 for Dragon works on an MPI. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? So what he's really talking about, so recently Ed Snyder produced this thing he called the Coco DAC 16, which is basically a Orchestra 90 clone, right? Hardware-wise. And included, I guess he included in that flash images, not only of the original Orchestra 90 Coco stuff, but also the version that's designed to work with the Dragon DOS. And here, I'm a little unclear on this, but the technical description is here if you need it. It's certainly going to be a lot better than I can describe it. There's a link to a worldofdragon.org post. And so basically something about something about the way the various selects are routed, that the ROM image that was shipped with the Coco DAC 16 isn't going to work for the Dragon in most cases, but it sounds like maybe it will work if you plug it into an MPI and then that into the Dragon. Is that the way you guys take this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of what I took from it too.
And so you may want to check it out and verify it for yourself if you're in that situation. Looks like there might be an updated version of the ROM to use as well here at the bottom of this link. I don't know. caveat emptor. Just be aware before you try to use it, or if you do try to use it and it doesn't work, be aware that maybe there's an issue there. Go check it out. All right. Well, that's it. Why don't we take another little break for some more messages?
Are you an active member of the CoCo community? Are you 55 or older looking for a change of lifestyle? Then see what CoCo Village has to offer. At CoCo Village, we believe that your retirement experience is all about enjoying pastimes and pleasures like nowhere else. And what makes CoCo Village truly come together for today's new breed of codger is our integration of the Tandy color computer. Whether you need to pick up an edge connector at the 24 Hours Part Shop or speculate with friends about the CoCo 4 in the club room, CoCo Village offers something for everyone around the clock. Enjoy a 24-hour staff of color computer specialists eager to assist you. Our training center offers a broad range of color computer courses, including fully accredited courses from Tandy University. If you're looking for an ideal backdrop for boating, trophy fishing, world-class tennis, championship golf, fitness training, and gourmet dining, look elsewhere. CoCo Village is targeted at a more cerebral, sedentary lifestyle. The only trophies here for the high score on Donkey Kong Remix. Why pay for impeccably manicured lawns and tennis courts when you can get what you really want? CoCo Fest, every day for the rest of your life. Located only miles from beautiful Wetumpka, Oklahoma, CoCo Village stands high above the plains. Experience carefree, maintenance-free, compact studio apartment living on our converted grain elevator campus. CoCo Village is affordable. In most cases, just your Social Security check and life savings will cover your monthly expenses. And we won't bog you down with endless floor plan choices. Every apartment is identical. Just pick one and go. As an added amenity, each studio apartment is pre-wired for complete control via the color computer appliance and light controller. Apply before October 27th and receive a free 5 1/4 floppy disk drive. Come see for yourself what CoCo Village residents can only describe as unique living. We offer tours anytime. Charges may apply. Isn't it time you enjoyed pastimes and pleasures like nowhere else? CoCo Village, where aging geeks go to die happy.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, Coco Talk. Coco Talk is the nation's leading live talk show about the Tandy color computer, airing live each week on YouTube, with video and audio replays available. Join Coco Talk to discuss community projects, hardware and software, interviews, reviews, demos, and tutorials. For more details about Coco Talk, visit cocotalk.live. Thank you to Coco Talk for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
All right. Now back with some more continuing news. Always so much news. News. Isn't it old and underloved and, no cult following for the Coco? Somehow or another we managed to squeeze out 30 plus news items every month. I think we're doing okay, huh?
We're still kicking.
All right. First item now comes from Walter Zydek. I guess that's how it's pronounced, Cydhek. Walter appears to be working on a tool called ImmuDisk. It says the ImmuDisk rebuild now supports JVC, VDK, DMK, OS9, parentheses, RAW, and VHD images. Those are all like physical format representations. And then semicolon, RS-DOS, OS9, Dragon DOS formats. And those are all like logical formats within the disk image, basically file system images. So sounds like he's got a tool that does something similar to what the Toolshed tools do, like the DECB tools or OS9 tools within Toolshed. But this is his own thing. Link out to a GitHub repository, and looking at it, there's a .sln file there, which I guess is a Visual Studio solution file. Lost me. I've never really used any of the Microsoft tools. So I think this is a tool maybe written in C#. or something like that, or maybe it's Visual. Yeah, CS. So I guess that's C#. So I don't know much about those tools. And I don't know much about EmuDisk, but it's cool to see a tool in development, and maybe at least I guess being C# doesn't limit it necessarily to Windows, so we'll see what it gets built for. So we may have a tool available, at least for Windows and possibly for, I guess for Linux and I guess maybe Mac too. I'm not sure. I don't know if you know more about it, or if you use it, let me know. See how it works. Any of you guys use the EmuDisk?
Not yet, no.
No. All right. Well, then we'll leave that right there. Moving on. Got a Facebook post from Stephen St. John, and he has he's got maps for each level of Madness in the Minotaur. Of course, that's for the CoCo. Always maps are helpful with text adventures, right? Can't keep everything in your head at once.
Sure.
So, if you are a Madness in the Minotaur player and have not solved the game, then you may want to check out these maps, see if they're helpful to you. Are you viciously copying them down now, Neil?
Oh, you know it. You have to.
I'm morally against cheating.
I'll bet. Oh, Lord. All right, well, let's move on. So this next link is from Simon Jonason, and this is actually not the most up-to-date on this project. If you search the Facebook group, you'll probably find later versions of this project. But so it's a wireframe graphics demo showing, I guess it's probably P Mode 4 on a CoCo 2, I guess, running, doing some wireframe graphics, kind of rotating in space. It looks pretty good. I know he's done a lot of variants so far, a lot of improvements, and so it's gotten to be a lot faster. This version, he was doing something where he had depth queuing on the wireframe, so that like when it rotated to the side that it was farther out, would be the lines would be shorter than the side that's closer to you, that sort of thing, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool to watch.
Up, Simon, and we'll see where that goes. I'm hoping that I'm sure he'll eventually fold this all into demo, and maybe a game will come out eventually too. I think that'd be cool. All right, now this one's not CoCo, but given that we've had the Pac-Man transcode, and we've got Nick Marentes' Pac-Man out there in the world too, this might be relevant. So this is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Prosecutors say, 6 charged with making fake Pac-Man games in Santa Clara. Now, I'm sure they're producing, arcade games. But, I guess they're using bootleg boards or something. Or I'm not sure what it centers around. Maybe it's around the bootleg graphics or something else too. But yeah, you can still get busted for faking Pac-Man games these days. So, if you're dealing in fake Pac-Man software or hardware, you may want to beware. So I don't want to discourage anybody, but I sure hate to see anybody carried off in metal handcuffs. So anyway, you've been notified. What do you think of that?
It doesn't matter how old the game or the software is, you can still get busted for bootlegging it.
Yeah, I guess so. Ooh.
No, it sounds like they were licensed to do the real machines and decided to pocket some extra funds and cut out the owner producer licensee. So that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah, well, that's probably true. All right. Well, moving on. Now, here's kind of a neat project. This is posted to the Atari 8-bit Computers Facebook group. It's a John von Neumann. I don't know that that name may be a pseudonym. I'm not sure. Says I wrote a PHP script that reads a PNG image pixel by pixel and generates Atari Basic code to create a copy of the image. Conversion is fast, but execution of the basic code in an emulator sadly is really slow. Well, that's probably not too surprising. So basically, he's got a script. I didn't look at his script, but I'm surmising that he's got something written in PHP that is essentially a graphics compiler that compiles to Atari, and it's probably either maybe it's like the equivalents of set and reset kind of commands, or pset commands, or it may be just the equivalents of pokes and peeks, or even like the loop with the where you read data statements and then poke. Like you do a code or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I included somebody could do this on the CoCo. It shouldn't be any big problem. So you could convert your graphic images to base over a cassette or whatever, and it'd be a cool project. Certainly something that could be done. A lot of knowledge of either CoCo Basic or presumably. I'm not an expert at PHP, but it looks pretty simple. So get on it, Neil. We need one.
We definitely do. It'll help game design, that's for sure.
It might. All right. The next link, an announcement from Pierre Sarazan. We haven't heard a lot from him in a while, but he comes on. He's got an enhancement to his CMOC C-like language compiler that it now supports floating point variables under Color Basic. And why specifically Color Basic? Well, because he's actually using the Color Basic ROM routines to do the to do the operations on those variables, which is kind of cool. You've got that code sitting there in ROM anyway. You might as well use it. The type in there is it's not quite the same as the normal IEEE format floating point like you'd find in most C compilers or whatever. It's actually a Microsoft binary format floating point. Has a Facebook entry if you ever want to check that out. Maybe I'll put that in the show notes. But it's kind of cool. And if you wanted to do floating point math, extra cool. So, very good, Pierre. It's good to keep your enhancements coming.
Yeah, that little language has certainly been moving along, and I know there's a few people that develop with it.
Yeah, I've seen some projects, both on the CoCo and for the Vectrix. Cool. I have a similar project that I've put on hold over as I've watched CMOC develop, but eventually I may I may have to break loose, so we'll see what happens then. Watch out. All right. So the next line item, it's actually, not quite the last news item. The PBJ WordPack ... special mission to make a clone available to anyone. This is from Felipe Antoniosi. This sounds like he acquired a WordPack RS from Gene Heskett with the proviso that he was going to reverse engineer it and make the information available so that anyone who wanted one bad enough could produce their own. Now, these WordPacks, these were basically they're 80-column cards that you could add to a CoCo and get a separate video output for cool text mode stuff. Probably used a lot with OS 9, or maybe with people who wanted to do a lot of typing or whatever back in the day, like for text editing or whatever. I'm not sure what differentiates the WordPack RS from some of the other WordPacks. I think maybe it has a different video controller, but I guess it was the top of the line WordPack. So pretty exciting. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, It is exciting. I was actually hoping to do a run of these at some point. Got a lot of neat uses for it. I mean, like you said, OS 9 would be good. Another cool thing that'd be neat if you can get it working is some of those Infocom games. Get them using that on the 80 column mode. The text adventures.
That might be cool.
I don't know how hard that would be.
Yeah, I wonder too. I see there's a character generator ROM that's part of this. I wonder if you could do, if you could do a kind of a custom project with your own character generator ROM that you could put like little graphical stuff in there, and then use it like a I don't want to say stamp, for doing graphics a little faster, where you can move
character graphics,
right? Character mode graphics, right?
Yeah.
That might be kind of cool too. Be a little extra hardware, but maybe something you could even switch on and off. That'd be kind of cool.
Well, it's awesome that Philippe made all the Gerber files and everything available, so you can get your own board created and parts list, and so it's probably a good project if somebody is looking to, if they're not familiar with putting together something like that for their CoCo. It's a good opportunity to learn.
Yeah, those long black cartridges, and I know there's a bunch of them out there in the community. I've got some number of them in my pile. I'm not sure how many I can dig out, but they were available for a long time at CoCo Fest, and lots of people picked up 10 or 12 at a time. and unless they've done a whole lot of projects or stored the plastic out somewhere where it's gotten brittle and useless, still be some of those cases out there. So put the word out here, Neil. If you're a CoCo Crew listener and you've got a stash of those long black cartridge cases, Neil's got a use for them. So send us your info.
We'll make it a word pack.
Well, it's true. That'd be a good way to use them or to pay them. All right. Okay. So come out more recently. So looking at the CoCo mailing list, we've got a post from Wrightville. That's JoJo, right?
Yeah.
Says he just experienced the same glitch as Ron Delvaux. I couldn't find Ron's posting about his glitch, but basically he was doing a copy between a physical floppy drive and a SDC drive, and after the copy was over, the drive motor on his physical drive stayed on. So the funny thing is, I think that's actually kind of relates to the problem that David Ladd was finding in MAME with the improper handling of the drive motor. So it's kind of funny that it pops up in a couple of different ways. Anyway, once this was exposed, we got Darren Atkinson, who was really the brains behind the CoCo SDC, and he asked about the version of SDC DOS involved, and a little back and forth, and then Darren announces that there's now a version 1.5 of SDC DOS available as of Saturday, August the 19th. So if you're a CoCo SDC user, you may want to check out cocosdc.blogspot.com and get your update to 1.5. Pretty cool stuff, huh?
Yep, quick and easy upgrade. So
we'll be on top of it, or what?
Hours before the show, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that covers our news. So why don't we take another, maybe a slightly longer break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
Tandy Assembly would like to thank our sponsor, Boyson Tech. Vintage computer systems, gaming consoles, and parts. Boyson Tech repairs, refurbishes, and sells vintage and game consoles. Be sure to visit them on Facebook. Just search for Boyson Tech, BOYSONTECH. Thank you to Boyson Tech for being a Tandy Assembly sponsor.
This week, the CoCo Crew Podcast is brought to you by Gimme Crisp Cereal. Roast any cereal is fine with me, as long as you spell it G-I-M-E. Magenta, red, buff, yellow, and green. Keeps your mind sharp and your body lean.
Start your day right with a delicious bowl of Gimme Crisp cereal. Crispy oat O's with colors of the Tandy color computer. Served with milk and juice, it's part of a complete breakfast, and moms love its 3 vitamins and herbs. And for a limited time, you can get 1 of 5 color computer program packs free. Just send $3 handling and 5 box tops from specially marked boxes of Gimme Crisp. Choose from Clowns and Balloons, Atom, Bingo Math, Color Backgammon, and Dino Wars.
Magenta, red, buff, yellow, and green. Keeps your mind sharp and your body lean. Gimme Crisp.
The Adventures of G.I. Joe, the Lost Satellite, starring talking G.I. Joe and his action equipment. G.I. Joe and the adventure team must track a lost satellite as it re-enters Earth's atmosphere.
Red alert! Power up the Tandy color computer.
The radar dish spins as it scans for the satellite. Then, suddenly, the color computer locks on.
We've detected the satellite. It's headed for the Pacific Ocean.
Here comes the G.I. Joe adventure helicopter with frogmen ready to assist in the recovery. They're in the water. Lower the winch and attach the satellite.
Got it. Satellite secured.
Create your own adventure. The G.I. Joe Satellite Control Unit with Tandy Color Computer. G.I. Joe Adventure Helicopter and G.I. Joe figures sold separately.
CoCo Crew Podcast. The CoCo Crew Podcast.
Oh, howdy, partner. Time for timer. Do you ever have that coding feeling after school? Boy, I do. I'm just itching to write a good program. When I'm trying to write a program I like, I hanker for a CoCo 3. Here's a neat little trick that looks really slick with parts from RadioShack. Here's a neat hardware hack. Come on. Here's an easy way to add a power-on indicator. Just attach an LED in series with a 470 ohm resistor between 5 volts and ground. Look, power's on. When I have data to place into mentioned arrays, I hanker for a CoCo 3. When the screen needs to be set to a new, brighter color set, or anytime I want to program in C, I hanker for a CoCo. An Apple II's a no-no. The CoCo is a winner before or after dinner. I hanker for a CoCo 3. Yahoo!
All right, CoCo Cruisers, now we're back, and we're going to talk about some feedback. First feedback item comes from John Mark Mobley, who was kind of the instigator of the whole assembly language versus assembly code versus machine code discussions that we've had over the past few months. He's got his message to us that says, if machine code is seen as a stumbling block, then don't do it. If machine code is seen as a foundation to build on, then do it. So there's John Mark waxing philosophical. It's like, do or do not. There is no try, right? Basically, that's the message, right? If you're scared of machine code, don't worry about it. You'll be fine with just assembly code. But if you think machine code is, the key to whatever it is you can't do, machine code and see if that gets you there. I think that makes a lot of sense. As John Mark can be a wise man.
You just need 16
All
toes.
Right. Yeah, 16 toes, exactly. And John Mark has 16 toes, oddly enough. No. I don't know that. I've never seen John Mark's feet.
We'll just propagate the rumor.
Just kidding. Mark, I'm sure you have 12 fingers and toes just like the rest of us. All right. Moving on. The next item is from D. Bruce Moore. So D. Bruce Moore. DeBruce. Is that like Robert DeBruce? Sorry, a little history joke there. John talks, that's me. John talks about returning 30 plus years later to code we tried to do as kids and finally making it work. That is exactly what my Forest of Doom game is all about. So I think we've covered some Forest of Doom stuff. I'm sure as he gets closer to a real release, we'll cover it even more. So that's Bruce's project where he has another CoCo adventure game written in BASIC that he's done a lot of work on and put some work in some graphics. I think he's even doing like a guidebook or something. Looks pretty cool. And he was at CoCo Fest showing it off. He had T-shirts. Looks like a cool project. I hope he's enjoying himself. And so there you go. So projects that you return to after 30 years can be both real and satisfying. Very exciting stuff. All right. Well, moving on to the next and final piece of feedback comes from L. Curtis Boyle. So look at this. L. Curtis Boyle, D. Bruce Moore. Both of those guys are Canadians. What's up with that? Neil, are you actually K. Neil Brookings or something like that?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, Canadians don't like their first names apparently.
That's it. What's your real first name there, Neil? Or what's your first initial?
So we always add an initial at the front. Yeah.
Yeah, you just make it up.
Oh Lord! I thought maybe the first initial was assigned to you the first time you ate at Tim Hortons.
No, so it's what sounds good, right? Like R. Bruce wouldn't sound as good as D. Bruce. It's not De Bruce.
So you should hereforth be known as O'Neill Blanchard, like O'Neill
Brookings. Yeah, that would work.
Brookings, sorry. not Brookins, but Brookings. Yeah,
yes.
Name altogether. Yeah. All right. Oh, must be getting to the end of the podcast. Let's see. So, from the comment from Curtis regarding self-modifying code, you're absolutely correct. That is most often parentheses always ? Used to speed up code. It is more complex to follow, though, if you aren't fully aware of which parts of the code you are self-modifying. So, so he's pretty well echoing what I had in the last podcast about self-modifying code. That, it's something you can do. It can speed up code, but it introduces a lot of complexity. So, use caution. All right, well, that's the end of our feedback section. So we're going to take another break, and then we'll be returned with the rest of the show.
Do you want to fully utilize the power of the 6809 and the RadioShack TRS-80 color computer? Then subscribe today to 68 Microjournal. 68 Microjournal was established with one objective in mind: to provide a magazine for 68XX users by 68XX users. 68 Microjournal has a strong worldwide following and has been covering the TRS-80 color computer longer than any magazine. Read product reviews, technical discussions, and get helpful hints about expanding memory, power supply cooling, repairing sticky keyboards, and connecting printers, to name just a few. A one-year subscription to 68 Microjournal is only $24.50. 68 Microjournal, dedicated to 68XX users worldwide.
I was a boy the day my daddy brought home that Tandy. And all day with that CoCo I would play. Then I hacked the blackjack program to give the dealer 5 cards. And I've been hacking up till this day. Well, I love to program BASIC on that CoCo. C, Logo, Pascal, and Assembly. Now you don't have to prompt me, little Tandy. But why do you have to prompt me? I wonder, why do you prompt me? Why do you always prompt me with okay?
You've been hearing all the buzz about Tandy Assembly. All RadioShack and Tandy computer models under one roof. It's happening October 7th and 8th in Chillicothe, Ohio. Don't miss our guest speakers, including Don French of TRS-80 fame, game designer Lance Miklas, and Scott Adams of Adventure International. Make your reservations today. Call 800-542-7919 and ask for the special room rate for Tandy Assembly. But hurry, the rates are only good through September 5th. Tandy Assembly. Some assembly is required.
All right, Coco Cruisers. This month we thought we would hit you with a couple of host discussions. We're going to do the first of those right now. Our first topic, I've noticed that we're seeing a lot of people, mostly people who are kind of new to the community, but maybe not exclusively. And it seems like it's become more of a practice for people to replace the 6809 processor in their CoCo 1 or CoCo 2 with a 6309, a Hitachi 6309 processor. Now, this kind of upgrade has been done quite a bit but almost exclusively on the CoCo 3. And on the CoCo 3, of course, you can run Nitrous 9. Which in fact Nitrous 9 came about as a way to exploit but later was through some work done by Boise Pete and others. Nitrous 9 was sort of backported to the 6809, and then some of the Nitrous 9 then also gained support for the CoCo 1 and 2. But in terms of other software, there's not a lot of other software. There are a few things, a few games, a few demos or whatever, but there's not a ton of software out there that will benefit from being run on the 6309. And of what there is, it is already dependent on the CoCo 3 to begin with. So with all that, that brings it to the topic of debate here or discussion. Is there any value, or how much value is there in putting a 6309 into a CoCo 1 or 2 or even a Dragon? So with that on the table, Mike or Neil, who wants to start?
I'll jump in. Yeah, well, like you said, I don't know what the value of doing that is, of putting a 6309 in a CoCo 1 or 2. I suppose if you had a bad CPU and you were replacing it and you had a 6309 handy, you could put it in there. But no, I don't know that it's a big selling point to put a 6309 in the CoCo 1 or 2. I don't think it runs any cooler, does it? Don't know if that would be a benefit, but I couldn't think of anything.
I don't know if it runs any cooler or not. It might be a little bit, I guess, just speculating, but I don't think it's a big deal. It's how much cooler it runs, particularly, if you're not running it in native mode or whatever. I don't know how much difference it makes. And you make a good point, though. If you have a dead 6809, then replace it with whatever you've got. It makes perfect sense. I've actually been hearing the claim made that the 6309s are available and or cheaper than the 6809s these days on eBay or whatever. Now, with my own investigations, I don't really see that. I don't really find that to be true, but maybe there are some situations or some certain kinds of searches people can do. I mean, just the claim that 6809s were hard to find, I then went to Jamico and typed in, 68B09E, and they had them, you could in stock, ship the same day. So they didn't seem to be hard to find, and they were like $4 a piece or something, so it didn't seem like they were expensive either. Yeah. So I'm not really sure who's looking for them or what they're finding that made some people seem to think that they were more expensive or harder to find. I don't know. What about you, Neil? I mean, you're probably our expert on what software is available that uses the 6309. I know Roger Taylor that uses the 6309. What else? I think some of the demos from Sockmaster you can 9, but I'm pretty sure those are all Coco 3 specific.
Yeah, that's just it.
Any ideas?
They're all Coco 3 specific that I know of. I mean, that is the question. Like, if it's an advantage, then it'd be worth doing on the Coco 1 and 2. But the only thing that I could really think of is I think Ed Snyder has his audio player. Is it the audio player or the video player he has?
Yeah,
I think that supports a 6309 on a Coco 2.
Right, and those are brand new. That code is brand new, like within the past few months or a few weeks, even as far as I can tell.
Right.
But yeah, I think some of his player stuff that he's been working on, the stuff with it kind of goes along with the special formats for media files that he's been posting to Facebook. I think some of those players are 6309 specific, so or at least able to support a 6309. So if you're getting, if you've got your Coco 1 or 2 or your Dragon and you're using the Coco SDC and you want to run the media players that are coming from Ed, well, okay, assuming that they're not checking for Coco 3 somehow, I don't know why they would be, then that might be a benefit. And that's kind of new. And I guess that's the other thing to put out there, is if we build up a stock of, the original Cocos or the Dragon style machines, the non-Coco 3 machines that have the 6309, maybe that creates more of a market for people to have 6309 specific programs that don't require a Coco 3. You see that as a likelihood or a possibility?
Yeah, I could see that happening. The other thing to mention that's kind of, it's at least it's a good thing, is that I think pretty much all of them that I know of, the CPU is socketed, so you can at least save the 6809, the Motorola processor. So it shouldn't go to waste.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been seeing a lot of people doing this mod when it seems like they were not they were not dead CPUs to begin with, and it kind of just it touches some retro thing inside me to think that they were killing a 6809 that was working perfectly fine just to put in a 6309 that will never really get used.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same.
At least some of them were soldered in because somebody was complaining about having to cut one out. So
some of them are for sure.
Oh, that's too bad. I thought they were all socketed on those older machines. I guess not.
If you're lucky, they
pointed out that there is a a Coco 1 or Coco 2 whatever build of Nitrous 9 out there. But what Boise told me is that even though you can build Nitrous 9 for the Coco 1 or 2, that there's no 6309 code in the level 1 Nitrous 9 kernel, which means even though it's Nitrous 9, it's not 6309. It doesn't really help you. Now, it might be, as someone suggested, maybe there's some Nitrous 9 drivers that are 6309 aware or whatever, and maybe you could run a 6309 driver on your level 1 Nitrous 9. I don't know. It starts to get pretty complicated, and I'm not sure what works and what doesn't when you start combining them at that level.
Or what the payoff would be for doing that.
Right. Yeah. If you get a few cycles in one driver on your level 1 OS 9 or Nitrous 9, would you ever notice? Who knows? So what does this come down to then? It's like, well, maybe it's worthwhile, but I wouldn't count on it. Is that the verdict?
Well, I guess the verdict. Well, yeah, I guess that's the verdict. But I guess that's just be aware if you're out there in the community. If just because a Coco 1 or 2 has a 6309 in it doesn't mean there's some magical capability that you're going to get from it.
Yeah, right. I guess that's the thing. If you unless you're trying to run something 63 that supports a 6309 on your Coco 1 or 2, then the chances of there being any real value in paying for a 6309 in your CoCo 1R2 is pretty slim. So, so yeah, I guess it's all right if we're trying, if people want to put them in there, it's certainly all right. You own the machine, you can do what you want. I guess I wouldn't let it make much difference in price for me if I was buying. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, in some cases it might be the opposite because somebody wants the original vintage item.
All right. Well, man law or crew law or something like that. We'll close this discussion and move on with the show, and we'll probably be back in a little bit. All right. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mike Rowan, one of the organizers of Tandy Assembly. We look forward to seeing everyone in Chillicothe, Ohio. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about one of the great events at Tandy Assembly. That's the no minimum bid auction. First, all of the auction items are donated. All proceeds from the auction will go toward the cost of the event. The auction is a great opportunity to get some big bargains on unusual vintage computer items. It's also a great deal of fun to see people, sometimes best friends, trying to outbid each other. We certainly hope you'll join in the fun at Tandy Assembly. As I said before, all of the auction items are donated. If you have any items or duplicates in your collection that you are willing to donate to the auction, we would certainly appreciate your donations. Just bring them to Tandy Assembly or contact us through our webpage, www.tandyassembly.com. Thanks, and we look forward to a great time with everyone at Tandy Assembly.
All right, welcome, CoCo Cruisers. We've got a treat today. We have an interview segment. We're going to be talking to Mr. Glenn Hewlett. Glenn kind of burst upon the scene late in, 2016, I guess, with his ambitious project to do some binary code translation from Space Invaders. And then I guess he quickly moved on from that to Pac-Man. Spent a few months working on Pac-Man and has brought that to a fabulous completion. If you want to see more, you can look for Steve Strobridge's YouTube channel for some examples there. And then it looked like maybe you're moving on to another, in some ways, equally ambitious project. You're not having to translate assembly code, but you'll still have to do just as much work, I'll bet. Looking at least one of the Williams games, it seemed like it was Defender. So Glenn, you have definitely come on and made a bright streak across the CoCo sky. So welcome to the community, welcome to the show, and with that, how you doing? Would you
Very
like
good,
to
thanks.
Would you like to tell us generally how you got started with the CoCo, and what's motivating you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, guys. Really look forward to the show every month. As far as my background with the CoCo, well, I guess actually computers in general. I guess it started with my brother when he was in grade 12 or 13 at high school. He was able to take home the Commodore PET computer on the weekend. So that was my first introduction to computers. I used to play on the Commodore when he brought it home and said, oh, this thing was really cool. I wanted to learn more about it. And then I think it was that summer he needed to do some video programming or video texting or something. And I remember he bought a TRS-80 Model 1 at the time, and it didn't work properly for him for what he needed for school. So he changed it out for a CoCo, which I pretty much took over after he brought that home. So that was the CoCo 1, and it was I think 16K extended basic, and I guess it was like right when it came out, like 1981-ish, somewhere around there. And then I was hooked on CoCo stuff for years and years. A couple of friends also had CoCo too, so we're always playing CoCo games and collecting games and everything. And then got into the machine language stuff. Just couldn't get enough of programming. So remember picking up the Edidasm cartridge and that was kind of strange because I didn't know what to do with it. I just figured, okay, this is what machine language programmers use. So get the cartridge and all of a sudden I'll be able to program machine code. But as everybody knows, with assembly language, it's not that quick and easy.
Right.
But then I got William Borden Jr.'s book and went through that, and it's like, wow, that was cool. I learned a lot with that manual. And then wrote a few utilities. One was on compression, called disk shrink. It was like you could take a floppy disk and it would compress it like sector by sector into a file, a compressed file on another diskette, and then you could send that over the phone. This back in the BBS days, or of course, so you could trade or copy disks that way and send them to a friend or whatever you need to.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Oh, I wrote a program for uncompressing ARC files back in the day. A lot of PC pictures and stuff were always in the .arc, like archive. It was like the predecessor for zip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those types of things. So yeah, I wrote a program that would uncompress those. It was called Unarc, I think, and Unarc 512 for the ones that had 512K. But as time passed, I stopped using the CoCo, moved on to the Amiga 500 and 3000, and then eventually got into the PCs, and then into the Macs, and I pretty much use Macs and Linux machines nowadays. And then I remember when, I don't know how I found out, but back in 2007 when Sockmaster did the Donkey Kong game, I found out about it. I guess I must just the odd CoCo news I'm still picking up or whatever, but I was pretty much right out of the scene at the time. But seeing that, it's like, oh, that's cool. That's amazing how somebody did that, But then I moved along, and always been into emulation though, with computers and arcade machines like MAME and all that stuff. And even when MAME first started coming out, actually back in the day, I was every time, I don't know if you guys remember or were into it at all, but it was like a big thing before MAME came out, there was a few different emulators for different dedicated machines type of thing. And then I forget the guy's name who created MAME, but he started adding up more games, and it could do more and more all the time. And I was right into it at the time, and I was helping out those guys. I was trying to find out any information I could about arcade cabinets, send them the information so that they could add it to the emulation and stuff. I remember finding out lots of information for Galaga at the time, and sending that to the guys who were working on MAME at the time. So yeah, I've always been into the emulation, and arcade emulation especially has always been interesting to me. So once I got, I guess, actually, I'm not sure. Sorry, I remember now. About a year ago now, I started getting into the Amiga emulator with the Raspberry Pi and showing my son. It's like, yeah, these are the old games I used to play on my Amiga and stuff. And one of them was Rick Dangerous, which was an excellent game. And I was thinking at the time, it's like, this game isn't too complicated. So it would be cool if I could play this, if they had this on the old CoCo. And that would make me think, it's like, maybe I could transcode this to the CoCo. And then I started listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast because it just piqued my interest in the CoCo again. Then I heard you guys talking about the CoCo, and it's like the first episode, John's technical section, whatever, he was talking about the 6809 and how interrupts work. And it's like, that was something I've never understood or anything about. Like assembly language, if you just write utilities and stuff, you don't really have to worry about that stuff. But if you do games and that's when it gets pretty heavy into that stuff. So yeah, you know what? I want to learn this. This is like a hole in my knowledge on how the computers work. So that piqued my interest. And then I thought, well, rather than porting an Amiga game, I should maybe try porting something I really care about, like Pac-Man. And I thought, well, Pac-Man's going to be really hard to start with. So maybe I'll try Space Invaders first because it's a little easier, a little older game. Shouldn't be as much to it. Just 2 colors, simple. So yeah, I plugged away at doing that. Learned as much as I could about the game and all that, and IRQs at the time, and went through a lot of the emails or the CoCo list. Sorry if I'm rambling on here too long.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It was also cool while you were working on the project. You've been blogging all your projects. You've been blogging quite a bit. It adds a lot of knowledge to the community. I think people enjoy the development blogs, and it's been a asset.
Yeah, I forgot I was doing that too. But yeah, not so much with the Space Invader because it was all pretty much just learning as I go and that. So I really didn't have much to share other than any little information I found from most of the information I needed. I got from the CoCo list email group, which those guys were awesome, man. So much knowledge there, and everybody's willing to share. It's really great. I wouldn't have been able to do this for sure without their help. And so anyways, yeah, plugging away through Space Invaders, did that. And then, once that was finished, actually, it's not finished yet, right? Because you have to rotate your monitor to play it. And I don't like that. I think at some point, especially now that I know how to do sound too, I think I'll finish it and rotate it. So at least you can play it normally and add sound to it at some point. But yeah, so after the Space Invaders was done, as far as I wanted anyways at the time, then I moved along to Pac-Man. And
now with Space Invaders, did you get any guff from Mark McDougall?
Actually, there was a certain point when I was getting almost finished that I found out he was doing it. So I didn't hear from him. I think I was stuck at a point where, when IRQ was messing me up, funny enough, because with the IRQs, it's pretty much like multitasking, right? Your computer's doing this, and then it just all of a sudden does whatever the IRQ is at the same time. Well, for a second, and then goes back to the regular program. And if you're not careful, your IRQs can be changing stuff that your program doesn't realize, and then your program just falls apart. And there was something that was freaking out my program at the time, and that's, I don't know, I was trying to find out a little more information online about Space Invaders at the time, so maybe if I knew exactly what was going on, it would help. And then I stumbled across his website, and he has a nice blog about it too. His progress over a month or two, and it was cool, but it didn't help me with my problem. But it was neat, just working away. Finally figured out. Oh yeah, of course, using that MAME debugger is amazing for that type of stuff. You can break it down anywhere you need and stop it and analyze memory, see what's changing, whatever. It's just time consuming. But eventually we got it. I got the IRQ licked and got the program written.
Cool. Well, I should have mentioned who else is here with us. Of course, we're joined by Neil Blanchard. Hi, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And Mike Rowan is with us.
Hello. And
we're also joined by our part-time host, Boise Pete. Hi, Boise. How's it going? Oh, maybe he dropped out. No, Boise's here somewhere.
Hi, Boise.
Hey, Glenn. It's good to be with you, man. Great work you did. Just really, really cool stuff.
Oh, thanks.
Very cool. Well, what do you do in real life?
I work for Bell Canada, our telephone and internet company for Ontario and Quebec.
Well, and do you develop software?
No, actually, software is just my hobby.
Cool.
For what I do for our internet company is I just basically maintain the high-speed network itself. Just make sure it's always running.
Sure.
More on the power side, like we have external remote sites, and I just make sure they're always running, 24/7 type of thing.
Sure.
It's just maintenance type stuff.
Cool.
I don't know. for some reason, I've always loved programming, but I just didn't follow it into a career. Kind of fell into the telephone company, and they've been treating me well ever since. So no reason to leave.
Well, it's good they treat someone well.
Have you been with Bell Canada for a while, Glenn?
Oh yeah. I think it's 28 years now.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, a few more years, and hopefully I can retire, and then I'll be able to program my CoCo 24/7.
We would all appreciate that.
Hey, Glenn, this is Boise here. I've got a comment and a question. What you do, what you did with Pac-Man is really cool. So there's this part of me that wishes when I was, 15 years old and had my CoCo 3 that I had this. And if you think about it,
too.
There's nothing that could have, other than we have great development tools, cross-development tools like MAME and so forth today that we didn't have back then, that really accelerates the development. But, you think about how things could have been different, and there's really nothing that would have stopped that exact same piece of code on a disk from running 30 years ago. Yet here we are taking it, now in 2017 when we have all these great tools. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that? When you're working on something like this, you have to think about that, right? And just ask yourself, what if?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like, man, why couldn't, they had some dedicated programmers from the companies that made these arcade games, or somebody who wanted to make some money, after the arcades, kind of died down, around the time the CoCo 3 came out. It's like, if they would have hired some programmers to do a real serious copies of their arcade games. If the CoCo had, a real version of Asteroids, Pac-Man, Defender, all these games that it can definitely play. At the time, I think everybody would have shook their heads like, wow, the CoCo is awesome. Let's all get a CoCo, right. Instead of going for an IBM PC or something. It's man, look, I could play real Pac-Man at home.
That's the other thing, right, is that the color computer was a great machine, but it sort of got passed up a lot of times for the Commodore 64 and other things that were sold a lot more and were much more popular. Yet I don't see those computers today with the renditions of games like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man as true to the original as we've done on the CoCo 3. So that's a very impressive feat.
Yeah, well, I think it's a testament to the power of the CoCo 3. That 6809 can really do a lot, if it's programmed right. But I don't think you can do that type of thing with the 6502 that's in the Commodore 64.
Right.
Or the Apple, for that matter,
That's right, and it's just ironic that now, 30 years later, the CoCo 3 is really outshining all of them when it could have done it back then, but like you said, didn't have the programmers or the tools, I guess, to accelerate the development. I would imagine it would be interesting to know how much longer it would have taken to do what you did if you didn't have MAME and you didn't have the cross tools in hand to do it.
That would have been, probably, I would say a year, if not more, because MAME was so helpful for me. And it helped me get back into the CoCo quickly, too, and get my assembly chops back up, because I could see right there with MAME, you can see all the registers in real time, what's going on. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's how that works and all that stuff. Well, it'd probably get back into that quick enough, but actually, the debugging, MAME was so important. There were certain times where even using MAME, I was stuck for 3 days, even a week straight. It's like, why is this not working? It's almost to the point, it's like, I'm just going to give up, but kept going at it and finally got it. So yeah, without MAME, I think it would have just, twice as long. And the tools too, like LWSM, it's so fast assembling the code. So you can, try things out real quick and see if it's going the right way or not.
Right.
If you're doing it, straight on the CoCo itself, the assembly time itself would have taken a long time. So I'm saying, probably a year. I know I was talking to Sockmaster about that, and he did everything on the CoCo. I think he used the drive wire, though, I believe. I might be wrong, but he did it all on the CoCo, and there was no MAME. He was, he disassembled the whole thing himself. So, big props to him. It's like, wow, because I benefited a lot from the internet, all the information you can get out there right now on these old games and all the hardware that works on them or they work off of. There's a lot of detailed information at your fingertips, luckily. But if the companies got behind it and did that back in the 80s, they could have done that too, because they're the ones who made the machines. They know they have the hardware and all that. That's what I always thought. It's like when you have official Sega version of this game, it's like I always thought that should be somebody's taken that code and translated it to that machine. It's not just somebody's, like, they hired some guy to port it over to that computer. It's like, well, what's so official about that other than it's done by us?
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky.
That's how I've always felt, anyways.
You're lucky in a lot of those if they even had design documents. Quite often, the official port was just somebody played the game enough to observe things, and
right.
And maybe they observed it correctly, maybe they didn't.
Still missing a couple levels here or there.
Exactly.
Yeah, just did a lookalike.
Lost in translation.
Yeah.
Hey, Glenn, you've got to do Joust, which is a 6809 video game from the 80s. I would imagine it would be a lot easier to do a 6809 based game than it was for Pac-Man, which I think was Z80?
Yeah, it was Z80. The thing with Joust, like, I've looked into the Williams games because I've decided I'm going to do Defender next as my next game, and Defender is pretty cool because it doesn't have any special video hardware to move the sprites around the screen. It's all done by stack blasting the sprites on screen and that. And I've gotten as far as making my own compiled blasted sprites from the code already, and I can already blast them on the screen about. I was thinking it's a little faster than the way they were doing it, so that's great because it saves me some CPU cycles. But they do have a little bit faster the way they erase the sprite, so it'll about even out. But the good thing is Defender's only running at 1 megahertz, and the CoCo 3 we can crank it up to 1.8 megahertz, that's right? Cool. So that'll give me some extra time to play with the sound and moving stuff on the screen, because Defender is a fast game, So I'm looking forward to finishing that because that's cool. But the other Williams games, they have special blitters hardware that actually moves the sprites around the screen without the CPU being used. Because like Joust is one of my other favorite games too, and I'd love to see that as well. But
I think that Williams blitter. We'll see. I think that Williams Blitter can actually do some operations too, like XORs and that sort of thing. Depending on, I think there were a couple of versions of them. Anyway, well, the biggest problem that I can think of when you go to the Williams games is the layout of the screen. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, actually, Defender it is weird because it goes down when you go. When you go through memory and you increment the memory, it goes down on the left and then all the way to the bottom of the screen. Then the next byte would start on the top, the next pixel over, and then down again.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I recall, the bytes represent 2 pixels that are side by side, but then the next byte is below it. So you have kind of
right below it,
instead of going side by side all the way across like most systems do. And it's not even just going up and down because like you said, each individual byte has some side by side. It's a little weird. It kind of makes the Apple II blush.
Yeah. Well, I haven't worked out that part yet, but like I say, I've got the sprites working. So as long as I can get like the coordinates and where it would show up on the screen, it shouldn't be too bad. Like show up okay, at this point, the way the Defender would use it, and just translate that into what the CoCo screen memory would look like. So it shouldn't be too bad, I'm thinking, but I haven't gotten that far. I still have to get the code because they have some bank switching as well.
Oh yeah,
Defender. They have like 4K banks. Like there's I think 4 of them that are bank switched in certain one location in memory, and then there's I can't remember 16K or something that's always there resident. So it references some of that RAM, and trying to disassemble that is kind of hairy right now. So that's one of the bigger blocks I'm going to be facing. But I haven't actually looked at it for the last few weeks. I've actually started working on a basic program that actually is going to take some sprite data and turn it into a compiled sprite itself. So it's like simplifies the manual labor of creating a compiled sprite from basically bitmap data. So I wanted to get this code. Like I'm having some fun because ever since I got back into the CoCo, I was using BASIC to decode the Pac-Man sprites. And I was having lots of fun. It's like, oh, this is cool. It's like, man, I remember playing BASIC like this. This is excellent. So for this, I'm doing the same thing. Just writing a BASIC program to do the same thing, debugging it, and trying to make it as smart as it can to make the compiled sprite as fast as possible, or whatever you give it in that way. Another thing I'm actually playing with is there's this cool demo on the Amiga called I forget what it's called now. Something about DOC is whatever. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of it. But anyways, it's a really cool demo where these balls are flying around, some graphics moving on the screen and stuff. And I was thinking, I wouldn't mind trying to make that on the CoCo too. So I'm kind of sidetracked from Defender right now, trying to get that going. And like saying, there's lots of sprites on this thing. That's kind of why I'm building this sprite compiler type thing. So keeping busy, anyways.
Cool.
Getting out of trouble.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
And it'll be a tool I'll share with anybody who wants to compile some sprites themselves for the future. Once I get it up and running.
Yeah, that'll save some development time.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be popular. And I've always found that fascinating when you do this kind of development, the kinds of tools that you do end up making to help the job along. It's as interesting sometimes as the software itself.
Yep. Yeah, like you could do it, brute force the whole way and get through it. But, next project, you just have to do it all again anyway. So why not create a tool to help yourself this time and in the future help yourself and anybody else who wants to do the same thing? Yeah, it just makes sense. It's like when I first started getting back into programming, I'm asking a million questions like, how do you add sound? How do you even check the keyboard for a key press or whatever? And it's like, I could find all these little things, but it'd be nice if there was an archive somewhere where we had like a library of these little tools and stuff. And like my Pac-Man upload, it's the commented source is all there, and it's broken down in a lot of parts. So if somebody wants to learn how to read the keys for a game or the joystick input, actually John gave me the code for the joystick stuff that I used in Pac-Man, which was really helpful. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Yeah, because I was trying to get the special 4-button controller, the Super Nintendo controller, working with the 4 buttons. Thinking, well, if I can get that working, maybe I can get the scrolling for Pac-Man. You hit a button, it'll scroll to the top or bottom, right, depending on what button you were hitting. But I was running into a roadblock with that. I think it was affecting the sound more than I wanted or something. I can't remember why, but I decided not to go that route. Just use a regular, I didn't use the extra button code for it. So, but yeah, like I say, the Pac-Man source code is there if anybody wants it. There's lots of stuff in there I've learned, like even just setting up the graphic screens and everything. So should be helpful. Anybody who's new anyways to assembly on the CoCo should help them.
Yeah, that'll be a great resource. I just had a quick question. Have you looked at Miss Pac-Man? Is that much different than Pac-Man code?
The code is very similar from what I've heard too. Like I remember watching a video on the guys who made Miss Pac-Man, and they basically they kind of like interjected like maybe a jump in the middle of some routine to their routine to do something a little different, then jump back. So it's kind of like the code probably doesn't change too much on the Pac-Man side, but then there's like a whole bunch of new code for the Miss Pac-Man changes. But I don't think it would be that different. It's other than, rendering a new maze, different colors, and Pac-Man itself is, little different sprite now. And you got moving fruit. So you got to add another sprite to it. But
right.
I think it would, it would be like, I guess, you'd have another whole section of code to translate to get Miss Pac-Man going.
Yeah,
that's true. It is a cool game. I've always liked Miss Pac-Man, and who knows what'll happen down the road. But right now, I'm like, I'm really well. I am done with Pac-Man. I'm burnt out with that.
I bet.
So maybe in a few years when I forget how much trouble it was, I'll move back into Miss Pac-Man. But I don't know. We'll see.
Just like having kids.
Yeah.
You get about the baby stage, and then you have another one.
Yeah, exactly. A couple years later, it's like, oh yeah, now I remember why what I didn't like about that. It's all good.
Let's see. Well, I mean, I guess what's next would be Defender or whatever. Do you have any longer scope or anything in mind for farther down the road?
No, not really. Defender will be enough for a while, I'm sure.
Yeah.
keep me super busy. But yeah, I do enjoy the translation type stuff, and I always say to my boys, it's like, hey, if you guys think of a game that I can make, let me know, and we can maybe work it out together and stuff. So, if I do think of something, at least I have the knowledge now of how these games work inside and out. So maybe one day I'll have my own game, but it takes imagination, and that I don't seem to have.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. You got to have an idea. So you have to have something to work towards or whatever.
And you don't want it to be very similar to some other games. You want it to be unique at least, right?
Sure. Well, games have to be fun too, right? So I mean, it's easy to say, well, I'll make this thing move around, or I'll shoot at an apple or something like that. But if it turns out it's no fun shooting at the apple, it's not much of a game.
Right. That's true.
But
it needs a little work. Yeah.
Just play around with something. Sometimes you'll find something that it's just a piece of something else, and it turns out to be kind of fun. Just don't be afraid to expand that, and
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, actually, I think you had one of your podcasts. You were talking about that. That was pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
How to build a game and stuff.
And if it fits on a cartridge, even more so.
Yeah, the cartridges are cool. That's for sure. Nothing like a cartridge.
Yeah, well, we like them.
Just plug it in and it works.
Just the demo stuff, and the odd time you see the thing on Facebook, like Simon's always doing something neat with some graphics and that. So, I think it was him who was doing some circle stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, how do you do circles in assembly language type? And that made me get back to that demo too. It's like, oh yeah, because they're using circles in this thing all the time, and just the movement. It's not just linear back and forth. It's nice and smooth animations. Like, yeah, let's see if I can work that out. So, he did help me a little bit with that, which is nice. Simon's great that way too. Again, like I say, there's so many helpful individuals in the CoCo community. It's great to be part of.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, what have we not asked you? What deep secrets do you have that's interesting to the CoCo world?
I don't know. I know you ask that to most people you interview, and I always like you asking that question, but being asked, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think I've gone through everything that I can talk about with the CoCo stuff.
Well, what about a message from you? What would you say to the CoCo world that if you're somebody who's just dipping your toe into the CoCo world, or just somebody who's a little curious and happens to hear what you've been doing? Why are you doing that? Why is it fun? Why is it satisfying? What keeps you in it?
Well, for me, it's, the CoCo is such a great memory for me when I was a teenager. I've always looked back at those years saying, yeah, I had a lot of fun with my CoCo, and I've always known it could do more than, the programs that were out there were doing. It's like, we could show off this machine, see how powerful it really is to the world, right? Because like Boise was saying, it's like, yeah, all these other computers always got the limelight, but the CoCo always seemed to be, put by the side. And I've always felt that was wrong. It's like, so to me, it's like, yeah, if you like programming, basic or whatever, just have fun with it. The CoCo is so easy to program and so user friendly, and then you have the great community to help you along with any project you're working on. So it's just why go anywhere else? CoCo does it all.
CoCo does it all.
I guess that's my message.
Awesome.
Yeah, CoCo can do it all.
Very good. Anyone else?
I just want to say, Glenn, again, the kind of stuff that you did, like Sockmaster with Donkey Kong and you with Pac-Man, this is just great stuff. It really invigorates the community. It exposes the CoCo to more people just as a result of doing something like this. And I hope you consider, whenever you call the Pac-Man project done, and I didn't get on here early enough to know if it's really, truly done, but to kind of advertise it out. There's great websites like Hackaday and other things that really highlight this type of work and kind of showcase it. So I hope you consider that.
No, that's a good idea. Yeah, maybe we should reach out to them. Let them know about it, at least if they don't already. The project is complete as far as I'm concerned.
I would second that. That does really turn heads when people that aren't familiar with the CoCo see that playing. They're really wowed.
That's cool.
The one feature I really like in the game is the scrolling. I mean, that's a very nice added touch.
It is cool.
Yeah, that worked out really well. Because
when you're
that was one thing when I was programming. It's like I didn't want to lose any quality of the graphics if I didn't have to. And I figured, well, worst case scenario, I'll shrink the sprites a little bit to fit it on screen. And I said, well, the CoCo can scroll, and I can fit most of the screen at the same time. Maybe it'll be good enough if you can just see most of the screen.
Yeah.
You don't really need to look at the score or how many free men you have all the time. So it's like,
right.
Yeah, I'll give that a try, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, it's a clever solution. It's the kind of thing that if you hear it at first, you think, well, that could be distracting, but I think you pulled it off really well.
Thanks.
What sort of algorithm did you use to figure out, when to scroll up and down and when not to?
Well, it's pretty much just based on where the Pac-Man sprite is on the screen, because you do have your X and Y coordinates all the time. So it's once it hits that IRQ, it looks, say, where is Sprite-Man or Pac-Man sprite going to be drawn, and if it's say north of or up above the center line, then start scrolling up, and if you're south of the center line, then just start scrolling down. And it'll go one scan line every IRQ hit, so it keeps it nice and smooth.
So basically
that's all there is to it. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, well, it always looks at every time the IRQ is hit. It just looks at it, saying, "Okay, I'm already down at the bottom. You're already at the lowest point, so I'm not going to scroll down any further anyway." So But it's just based on where Pac-Man is.
Hey, Glenn, and Neil, you may have to edit this question out, but did you catch any grief, Glenn, from Nick Marentes? Because he did a Pac-Man port probably about, I don't think it was really a port. I think he basically did what we were talking about earlier, just eyeball the original game, which was a pretty good rendition, but obviously not what you did.
Yeah, no, Nick was great. He didn't say anything about me doing it or have a problem with me doing it. It's like his game is an excellent copy of Pac-Man, but no, he was cool with it. I think he understands the differences, between his version of it and what mine was is, the translation version of the original code. So, he didn't have a problem with it. And I'm sure, it's not like we just were competing at the same time either, right? His came out quite a few years ago. So I'm sure that helps too.
Yeah. Well, plus yours is, like you say, a completely different exercise. I think that deserves some merit just by itself, just the kind of exercise you're doing. And it's just interesting to see if you can pull it off.
Yeah. There was, at a point there where I finished the transcode and I just had some sprites coming on the screen, but they were slow. It wasn't optimized like the compiled sprites, and it was really slow at first. It's like, holy mackerel, this is not good. It's like, I just spent the last 2.5, 3 months, whatever it was at that point, and this is totally unplayable, right? It plays like Pac-Man, but nobody's going to want to play this. And that didn't even have sound yet either.
Wow. Sometimes you just have to power through those.
Yeah, like I say, I learned a lot about speeding up the sprites from that, and of course optimizing the code too, where I could, helped big time, and then added the sound, and everything still worked perfectly. So yeah.
Well, I tell you, I was really impressed when you posted the you had the two videos side by side. One was actual Pac-Man, maybe it was in MAME, but still actual Pac-Man, and then your implementation, and side by side, and they were, I guess it was the track mode or whatever, but they did the exact same thing pretty much at the exact same time. And once you let it run long enough, you could see there was a slight difference in timing. But boy, other than that, it was just really spot on. It was very amazing.
Yeah, that was a cool point. Just making sure it was running just as fast as the original. It's like you're saying, eventually it gets out of sync because the real game runs at 61 hertz, and CoCo is tied to 60 hertz for the IRQ. But other than that, it was running side by side perfectly. It's like, awesome. I was really happy at that point.
I saw that
Finally.
video, by the way, on YouTube, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and it was, I think it was maybe a week or so before that, I was testing the MAME out, or on MAME with the CoCo 3 Pac-Man version that I did, and just getting to that second apple stage, because that's about as fast as the game gets. And just seeing, it's still flying at that speed, because I was a little worried, still when it's going as fast as that Pac-Man could go, is my version still going to be able to keep up with it? And luckily it did. So that was neat too. So those were some big steps forward, or points that I was happy about. So I had to share them with the world. Here's some videos.
I definitely understand that.
Yeah, we're glad you did.
Yeah.
Did you consider porting it to OS 9?
Well, like I say, the sources.
I don't think you could. I don't think that'd be possible.
Might have some timing
the source
issues.
Code is there if somebody wants to.
Well, Glenn, are you happy with how the community has responded? Do you feel like they've treated you well?
Well, like you say, there was a lot of great help along the way. A lot of people on the CoCo email list there that answer the questions I have, and almost always have examples or offer some advice, or willing to help look at the code and speed it up themselves if they could. It was just fantastic, So I feel glad that I could finish the project and give it back to the CoCo community, to thank everybody that helped me out, and anybody else who might want to play. Bruce Moore, he posted some videos on Facebook of his kids playing Pac-Man. It's like, oh, that's awesome. Love to see stuff like that. So yeah, well, cool. The community is great. And, I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, once in a while, somebody, maybe maybe more than once in a while, somebody will post about a new project, and there'll be that one guy who comes out of nowhere and says, "Wow, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," or "Why would you want to bother to do that?" or something like that. I didn't see anything like that with your project, so maybe you're just really good at picking projects.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess that's why some people like to keep their projects secret or something. I don't know.
That could be.
To me, it's like, the problem is if you do say you're going to do a project, then it's kind of like you have to do it, and that's I think the only downside to it. It's like, I've said I'm going to do Defender next, but now I feel like I'm under the gun. I should keep working at it, but
that's a good thing.
It is good, but you don't want that pressure. It's like, I'll get to it when I can, type of thing. I still, want to maybe hack around and do some other projects. Like when I was doing Pac-Man, it was all about Pac-Man because for myself, I wanted to finish that before I moved on to anything else. Because I know if I stop midway and I go and do something else and come back to it, it's it'd probably take me a month to remember where I was.
Yep.
And what I had to work on and stuff. So it's like, just finish it. Just keep plugging away while it's still fresh in my head, where I am, what needs to be fixed, all that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of scared of Defender that way. I don't want to get into that position again, but I know I'm going to have to at some point.
Right. Well, you know what? You obviously can do it. So I have full confidence in that. I mean, if you did Pac-Man, Defender ought to be doable as well. The other thing too, I was thinking about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying Defender is looking promising so far from what I can see. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say, Glenn, was that you need a nom de guerre, just like Sockmaster did the Donkey Kong port. You need some kind of name to kind of go with your technical badass abilities here. Have you thought of something?
Actually, I usually go by Nowhere Man is my alias. Doesn't sound so badass though. But I actually asked Sockmaster where he came up with his name. I don't know if I should divulge it here or not. It didn't sound like it was a private thing. He was just saying on old days when he was BBSing, they asked for a username and password, and he had his foot up on the desk and he was looking at his socks and he just came up Sockmaster.
Oh, that's cool.
That was kind of funny. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to edit that out or what. Maybe you should ask him if he's okay with that.
I'm just glad he was looking at his sock.
Yeah. Good one. Knows what he could have been the master of.
Oh, Lord. All right. Well, floor's open. Anyone else have something to add? Mike?
Can't think of anything.
Neil?
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with what Boise was saying, that it'd be nice if maybe if Glenn could get like an alias or something, or like a website, because it also gives him exposure, but it gives the CoCo more exposure as well. Different communities see what this machine can really do. It just gets out there. That's a cool thing.
Maybe Canuck Coder or something like that.
Yeah, Canuck Coder. That's not bad. This is what our Canadian content interview for the month.
Yeah,
that's right.
This will just keep some of the heat off of Neil. All the Canadian jokes can go to someone else for a while.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's probably going to cover it. Glenn has been a great addition to our podcast. I appreciate you sitting for the interview. And
thanks for having me on.
Certainly wish you well in your future projects. And as they come out, we'll want to talk about those as well. So save some space for us.
Definitely, guys. Always for you guys. Really enjoy your podcast every month.
Awesome.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hi, I'm Mike Rowan, one of the organizers of Tandy Assembly. We look forward to seeing everyone in Chillicothe, Ohio. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about one of the great events at Tandy Assembly. That's the No Minimum Bid Auction. First, all of the auction items are donated. All proceeds from the auction will go toward the cost of the event. The auction is a great opportunity to get some big bargains on unusual vintage computer items. It's also a great deal of fun to see people, sometimes best friends, trying to outbid each other. We certainly hope you'll join in the fun at Tandy Assembly. As I said before, all of the auction items are donated. If you have any items or duplicates in your collection that you are willing to donate to the auction, we would certainly appreciate your donations. Just bring them to Tandy Assembly or contact us through our webpage, www.tandyassembly.com. Thanks, and we look forward to a great time with everyone at Tandy Assembly.
All right. Welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. This is John Linville, and this is going to be our tech segment for this month. We're going to cover or recover a topic that I've already posted a blog post about. That's how to embed a color basic program onto a cartridge and have it run from there. Technically, I have it loads from there. It doesn't actually run from there. Anyway, I had this posted on my Retro Tinker blog. I'll include that link in the show notes so you can follow along. You know, that's sort of the idea. Sometimes writing of this technical stuff is a little easier if somebody walks you through it verbally. You can refer back to the text, whichever one works for you. Or, you know, if you've already read it and you think you understand it, well, you can just fast forward through this section of the podcast. All right, so, well, what are we talking about? So as you know, I kind of have an affinity for the ROM cartridge as a way to distribute programs for retro computers, especially games. And, you know, typically these ROM cartridge programs are written in assembly language or possibly written in another language that gets compiled down to, well, machine language, or, you know, again, back to that debate, is assembly language and machine language the same language? Well, you know, let's just say machine language and be done with it for now. Having something load from, having a program written in BASIC come from a ROM cartridge is a little unusual. You know, why isn't this done? Well, you know, typically when you think of a ROM cartridge, you think of professional software and higher performance stuff, especially in terms of games. And so that may just be your answer right there, is typically you're not going to get your highest performance from a game written in BASIC. And also the BASIC language is often shunned by professional programmers even back in the day. Why would you want to do this? Well, you know, it depends on what kind of game you're writing and, you know, how important absolute performance is. You don't necessarily need to squeeze every ounce of performance out of the computer for every different type of game. And sometimes the convenience of having a load from a cartridge can make up for that lack of performance, or it's just a plus on its own. Anyway, you know, we like, as I already said, we like cartridge games around here. So we're just going to assume that you understand why you'd want to put a game on a cartridge. You know, I'm going to reach out and tell you I understand that if you've written a game in BASIC that you're proud of and you want to distribute, I think being in BASIC is good enough. You don't need to rewrite it in assembly language just to distribute it on a cartridge. But the problem, of course, is how do you do that? There is no cart load command in BASIC, or there's no way to start a BASIC game from a cartridge, and you know, there's nothing built into the machine to have you do this. So you kind of have to trick the machine if you want to do this. So, you know, how do you do it? Well, looking around in the history, you haven't been around the CoCo for a while, and you remember various people's websites, and the question came up of people have been talking about putting some basic games on cartridge ROMs like I said, I've been trying to encourage people to put games on cartridge, but then some people come out with pretty good games written in BASIC, and so, well, those could be on cartridge too, but how? And so historically, I remember that there used to be a web page out there somewhere that kind of described how to do this, and I mostly disregarded it because it's sort of outside my own interest at the time. And I went looking around for it, had a little trouble finding it. I even, with the help of Boise, kind of reached out to Robert Galt, who's pretty well known in the community, at least on the CoCo mailing list. And I thought that he had perhaps been the one that had written the page in question, but it turned out he didn't. But Dr. Galt did he did summarize or surmise a way to do it, and it turned out to be pretty close to what was already proposed. I did eventually find Paul D's CoCo pages, and it slips my mind who Paul D actually is. If you know who Paul D is, or if you are Paul D, write in and send us some feedback. Tell us, what happened to your pages after GeoCities, why you didn't recreate them after GeoCities disappeared, or whatever. But anyway, so that's the story is that eventually stumbled back across Paul D's CoCo pages, which had been on GeoCities, and the history of the internet will tell you that after Yahoo bought GeoCities, they shut down those pages, which were basically an easy place to put a small website in the maybe not early, but kind of teenage years of the internet, or at least the public internet as people know it, or the World Wide Web, shall we say. Anyway, fortunately, there's an archive of the GeoCities pages, maybe more than one, but they've been preserved to some extent, at least for now, and so you can still see this one of Paul D's pages where he describes a technique for loading BASIC from a ROM cartridge. And like I said, I compared this to what Robert Galt had suggested, and there's pretty similar technique, and I kind of looked at both of them, and my final result on the webpage is a little bit of a combination of both, but largely originally copied from what was on the Paul D page. Anyway, I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. So the process is relatively simple. So you start with actually getting a copy of the basic program, but not just a program like you listed to the printer, but a copy of the program as it's actually stored in memory. Now, as you may or may not know, when you store a basic program in memory, it doesn't store it letter by letter the way you'd type it out. So instead, as you're entering the program, it will recognize the basic keywords, things like for and next and go to, those sort of things. And it assigns a number to the various keywords. And so then when it stores them in memory, instead of storing the ASCII characters for those words, it'll actually store the number. The numbers are actually in a certain range so that it can tell without looking that immediately this number that it just read is actually a keyword and not just an ASCII character. So it's a little, inside baseball on how the interpreter works. But the point being is that in memory, the program looks a bit different than what it would look like if you just dumped it out to the printer. Right, so and that's what we want, is actually an actual copy of what the program looks like in the CoCo's memory, so that we can recreate that. So we have to extract this program. And so how do we do it? Well, so it turns out there's some places in the CoCo's memory that store pointers to the current program the current basic program in memory. And so the procedure goes through and reads the start and end address pointers and does it byte by byte, so it does a little math to recreate the 16-bit equivalent values. And then it does an actual C-save-M. Now, that's a cassette save for like machine language, so it's really the program that you would use to save an in-memory copy of a machine language program. And that cassette command C-save-M. And so here, instead, you're not actually saving a machine language program, of course, you're saving the actual in-memory snapshot of a basic program. But the commands are basically the same either way. It's just a matter of, passing in the addresses you want to save. So you save this out, and so I'm assuming that you're using an emulator, reading a CAS file or cassette file. And so once you've saved the program out with the C-save-M command, then you use the KECB tool from the Toolshed project to get a copy of that program, or your memory image of your program. So that's step one. So you save that off. So then step two is you want to build a piece of code that actually is a machine language program, a small machine language program that runs when the cartridge when the CoCo boots up and initializes the cartridge and jumps to it, as in an auto start cartridge. And so, again, this program is mostly copied from what was on the Paul D page. I, kind of cleaned it up a little bit or made a few things more to my own liking. Mostly left it alone because, he uses a lot of decimal integers, and whereas I would tend to use hexadecimal integers. I did change one thing where he reads the file in. He looks for 4 consecutive zeros as the end of file marker. I was only getting 3, so I changed the program to be read 3. It works for me. Your mileage may vary, I guess, but you'll just have to try it out. Anyway, the blog post has a complete listing of this loader program, and it's pretty simple. I'll go into a little bit in a second how the program actually works, but anyway, it's there. There's a command for running LWSM as the assembler to produce the binary image of the loader program, and you'll see it uses the format raw for the output, and that's the headerless format, the one that actually looks like what memory looks like. And so that's what you want when you're doing this ROM image. The next step after that is to combine those two parts. So you take the loader image, the raw bytes that look like what the ROM should look like, and then you immediately put after that the in-memory image of your basic program, and copy that out to a data file that you will use for programming your ROM or EEPROM that you're going to put in your cartridge. So with a Unix or Linux system or other Unix inspired system, that's going to be the cat command. So cat loader, and then what I call cartprog, which is the memory representation of your basic program, and then redirect that to EEPROM.dat. If you're using DOS or Windows or whatever, the command is different. I think that's the copy/B and then one file plus another, something like that. Anyway, consult your DOS or Windows manuals. All right. So once you've got that, you burn it to the ROM, you pop it in, and as long as you match the capabilities that are required to the machine you pop the cartridge into. In other words, if you write a program for Extended Color Basic, you'll of course need a color computer with Extended Color Basic in it to be able to run. But as long as you do that, and as long as we're not talking about a CoCo 3 Super Extended Color Basic program, which is a separate problem that I'm gonna delay and talk about probably next month. Anyway, if you process your files this way and build your ROM image and pop it in a cartridge, that's pretty much it. It should just boot up and run your basic program. And so if your basic program, if basic performs well enough for what you want to do, then there you are, Bob's your uncle. So how does this actually work? Well, okay, as we've got it in the blog post, once you stick your auto start cartridge into the CoCo, and that's an actual hardware thing where the cartridge loops back from the E-clock to I think it's the E-clock, anyway, back to the cartridge interrupt line. That's how the auto start is detected. Color Basic transfers, after it's initialized itself a certain amount, it comes up and it'll transfer control to the loader program, which is the machine language program we talked about before. The loader program does a few more initializations to kind of make the all right, let's start over. The loader program does a few more initializations to make the Color Basic interpreter work, and then it copies the memory image of the basic program over to where it's supposed to go in the CoCo's memory. And as part of that, he then sets up the pointers that the color computer interpreter uses for determining the start and end of the basic program in memory. So basically it just sets up the memory image in a way that the Color Basic interpreter will find sane. So anyway, so like I said, the loader program figures out where the memory image is that's been concatenated onto the end of it in the EEPROM, copies it out to the actual RAM in the CoCo. So this is similar to what would happen if you were doing, say, a C load or a load of a disk program. It's just instead of doing something, executing a routine in the basic ROM, you're doing it all on your own now. But anyway, the final little trick is the loader program then takes and enters into the keyboard buffer for Color Basic the RUN letters for the run command. This is kind of neat. So rather than take advantage of its own knowledge or whatever to start the program, it just puts in the run command into the keyboard buffer. It's just like someone typed it, and then it starts the command interpreter. He reads off the buffer, says RUN, and it'll just run. RUN kind of sounds like a question. It's funny, but he executes a run command, and it says, okay, well, where's the Color Basic, or where's the basic program? And we've already set that up. So the basic program works just like it's supposed to. So anyway, that's pretty much it. You just have your own program do the equivalent of loading, what a C load what a C load or load command would do. It sets up memory for the interpreter and then jumps into the interpreter as if nothing's happened. Yeah, that's just it. At the end of my blog post, I had several comments on my own that I call errata notices, where I made a few changes after the initial edit. Pretty simple stuff. There is someone else posted a question on Mia M. I'm not sure who Mia is. She asks about, she says she has no experience with Color Basic, but on the 6502 versions of Microsoft Basic, basically you just would be able to point the start of basic program to the EEPROM and then skip everything else and just jump into the interpreter. And that was really what my initial thought had been too, but that's not going to work, partly because, or at least that might work for some program, I'm not 100% sure. But it won't work for most programs because the way the interpreter lays out memory, it has those, like I said, it has those initial pointers where you have the 2 pointers for the start and end of where the program is stored in memory. But the thing is the Color Basic uses that end of the basic program as also the pointer to where variable storage begins. I think it's variables, possibly it's arrays, one or the other, and kind of has it built in. And since it's not a separate pointer, there's sort of this built-in dependency that any variables need to be stored immediately after the basic program. And so if your basic program is then stored up in cartridge ROM and you declare a variable and try to write to it, that's just not going to work. And in this case, it probably won't even matter that you can't write to it, because it'll probably just confuse itself when it tries to do math based on assumptions that certain variables, certain locations should be after locations that they're instead of they're coming before, and things will get all confused. Well, anyway, just don't do that. But no, like I said, copying the basic program into RAM recreates basically the same environment that you would have had if you had typed in the program on a cassette-based system, which is probably the best you can really hope for. Now, if your basic program depends on disk access, well, you're going to have to do something different then anyway, because you're not really going to be able to put that on a cartridge, since the cartridge ROM and the disk ROM occupy the same space. Anyway, so that's about it. So kind of a cool trick. You can take your basic program and get it on a ROM cartridge and have it start up immediately at boot up. It's probably the easiest way to get a basic program to start immediately at boot, especially if you don't want to have a floppy drive or whatever tied to the machine and have it running HDB DOS or one of the other DOSes that'll do autoexec.bas. So anyway, maybe that's not such a big deal since that includes DriveWire, but it's a thing. I guess I'm kind of rambling at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Well, like I said, this solution will not work. I think it will work on a CoCo 3. I'm not well. Yeah, it should work on a CoCo 3, but it won't work if you're using the CoCo 3 Super Extended Color Basic commands. To make that work, well, you got to do things a little bit differently. So if you're interested in that, like I said, I think we'll probably cover that next month. It's not really a difficult task, but there's a little more to it, and I'd like to be able to explain why it's necessary in the first place. So if you're interested in that, or whatever, please just stay tuned, and we'll get that answer for you. So anyway, thanks for listening, and CoCo forever.
911, what is the address to your emergency?
I'm not taking it anymore. I've had enough!
Meet Ryan. He's been up all night debugging a program on his color computer. If only he had subscribed to the Rainbow. The Rainbow features more information and more in-depth treatment of the TRS-80 color computer, TDP System 100, and Dragon 32 computer than anyone else. If only Ryan had joined the thousands of people who say that the Rainbow is an absolute necessity for their color computers. Don't become a statistic. 12 issues of the Rainbow is just $22. Don't become another Ryan. The Rainbow, the color computer monthly magazine.
La-di-da-di. La-di-da-di. You know what? La-di. La-di. You know what? Now beat this. La-di-da-di. We like to party. We don't cause trouble. We don't bother nobody. We're the CoCo Crew upon the mic. We talk retro-ish things, and we do it right. All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back. We're going to have another little discussion this time. We touched on this in the news section about the where was it? About the Save the Machine Preservation Group, which had a fire. So they had is essentially a little museum. They had a collection of vintage machines. I'm not sure how extensive a collection it was, but I think it was big enough that if you're a retro person like me, that you kind of say, ooh. And so, anyway, this raises the question. It's not the first time I've heard of something like this, where, a vintage computing museum or something gets burned down or destroyed or something. And so it raises the question for me: is our museums really the best place for vintage machines? And I guess we certainly want some representation of vintage machines in museums, but there's probably some people who think that all machines are older than a certain point should go to museums. Just as there are people who think all sorts of antiquities belong in museums, old cars or old pickaxes or old whatever, old power drills. But and so I'm sure there's extremists on that issue, just like surprisingly sometimes there's on almost every issue in the world these days. But, like I said, I'm sure a lot of people think that's a good thing. Put your old computers in the museum, then they'll be preserved forever. But I guess my question is maybe it's better, or at least it's better to have at least some portion of the world's collectible computers or vintage computers actually in the hands of private collectors, because generally speaking, not all of our houses will burn down at the same time. So there, I'll set that one out on the table. Neil, how about you? You want to start this time?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I definitely agree. I mean, it should be at not just museums. I mean, museums are a good place to be, but also with private collectors, and not so much just for even for safety, but it's nice that these machines are getting used. I mean, if everything's just in a museum, it's kind of boring, right? Especially if they're not even turned on, they're just behind glass or something like that. There are some cool computer museums, like Mike knows. We went to one in Brantford a few years ago, where a lot of the machines are plugged in, and you can actually use them. So that's kind of cool to see stuff like that. If you're into old machines, but you don't want to own every one of them, but you want to check them out and play around on them a little bit, places like that are kind of neat to see that are popping up.
Yeah, definitely. That was I didn't say it in the intro, but that was definitely one of the things I had thought about on this topic. Was once they're in the hands of a museum, in most cases, they're completely out of circulation, or at least only within the circulation of a few curators or docents. Watch me exercise my vocabulary. Those people get to use the computers for whatever they want to do with them. But of course, they'll tend to be very conservative uses or whatever. They're not going to sit down and write, envelope pushing arcade games to run on the 60-year-old machines or whatever else. Now, maybe nobody else will either, but I think it's more likely it'll happen if it's in the hands of some private collectors. But, what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no question. Well, I think first of all, many of the the computers are in museums, so they are being preserved, and that's good. And I really tend to think of museums as, for future generations. It's not so much our generation, but when we're all dead, people will be curious about it, and they'll see it in the museum. But yeah, we definitely don't want to see things disappear. I know that fire was terrible, and it was connected to so many other organizations and social events, and where people actually were working with this stuff, and it's a big loss. But having it in a museum isn't going to help them replace any of that. They'll have to slowly rebuild it, and like you said, it won't never be quite the same. It's funny. I've got a lot of my collection in a temperature controlled storage, just because of the quantity of it, and I don't want it rotting in a basement somewhere. And it wasn't for 4 months after I got that there was a flood, and thankfully there was not, there was barely any moisture in my unit, and I had things up on shelves and actually had most things in plastic sealed tubs. So, but it does give you pause when something like that happens, that you couldn't replace some of the stuff, or it would be awfully hard. But I think there's no beating having it spread out across many people that are actually using it, and that's not going to happen in a museum.
Cool. Well, I think we're largely in agreement there. Well, that said, I don't think we're discouraging anyone from putting something in a museum, but I think maybe what we're calling for is more museums to follow the example of, well, maybe the Living Computer Museum out in was it Seattle, or the museum, the smaller museum that you and Neil visited last year. Things where people actually let you touch the machines, actually let you experience, what it's like to type in a basic program. Maybe let you experience what it's like to record something on cassette tape. And some of those may ultimately require people with real skill at building museum exhibits to be able to produce something that's both usable enough to hold somebody's interest and teach them something, and sturdy and rugged enough to actually survive contact with the public. Which relatively small bits of my collection are rugged enough to stay in contact with the public. That's why I originally built that arcade style joystick for Farfall, is because I wanted to be in a local maker show, and I didn't want the regular public to tear apart my 30-year-old joysticks. So there it was inspirational, right? To build something that a little tougher. And it's not very realistic, and so I can't imagine dumping a bunch of CoCos or Apple IIs or Commodore 64s or whatever in a storefront anywhere and expecting them to survive contact with the public for very long, or even to draw enough of the public to support the endeavor. But maybe maybe it'll be different in the future. I don't know. I guess that's one other twist is, a couple of years ago, going to CoCo Fest, I had my son with me, and we stopped in Dayton, Ohio, and we went to a Packard automobile museum. I don't know if you're familiar with Packard. It's a make of automobile in the United States that stopped being produced, I guess, in the 50s or the 60s or whatever. Anyway, so it's a museum full of old cars, and pretty cool, but most of them bone stock, which is cool and all, but living real life lets us know that not all cool cars are bone stock, right? So head down to the drag strip on a Saturday, and you'll see a lot of cars that are kind of old, but they've been tricked out in quite a different fashion. And so I guess the question there is that if we did say just stick with the museum, would the museum have any of those hot rods in it, or would it only have the bone stock machines, and would we lose something in the process? Anyway, probably not a lot to discuss there. So I think we probably beat this one to death. Anyone else have a point to make? Or all right, we'll just call this one quits and move on with the show.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? It's Mr. Gameplay Goodness himself, OG Stevie Stroh, and you are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, the greatest podcast in the history of the human language, with your host, John Linville, Neil Blanchard, and Myro. Back to you, CoCo Crew.
As John would say, hello, CoCo Cruisers, and welcome to Neil's Corner. Here we are, just you and I, at the last segment of this podcast. I am sure you all can guess what game I'll be talking about this month. You guessed it, Pac-Man. And I'm not just talking about any old version of Pac-Man. I'm talking about the arcade transcoded Z80 CPU to 6809 CPU version by Glenn Hewlett. Here's the rundown. This arcade port requires a Color Computer 3 with 512K of memory. It was released in July 2017 by Glenn Hewlett, a fine Canadian fella at that. So this game is brand new and hot off the press. If you have been living under a rock or completely off the grid with no internet connection and haven't heard of it yet, which I'm sure you have by now if you've been listening to this podcast in order, you can download it on Glenn's very own blog site at www.nowhereman999.wordpress.com. I also highly recommend to check out Glenn's blog site. He has some very well-written, informative blogs explaining the process of transcoding the arcade version of Pac-Man to the CoCo, and also other related CoCo programming tips and tricks. Alright, on to the game. I was very fortunate one day in mid-June, and I got a surprise email from Glenn with an attached copy of a beta release of his Pac-Man port. I just couldn't wait to finish up the job I was on and head home to try it out. I got home, copied the disk image onto my memory card, and popped it into the CoCo STC. Before I knew it, I was playing the original arcade version of Pac-Man on my CoCo 3. It just didn't seem real. The cool thing is, I played Pac-Man so much back in the day at the arcades that I knew this version very well. So playing on the CoCo, I could see this was the real deal. This version has it all, from the original authentic music, silky smooth speed, and all the cutscenes present. It even has the feature of gaining speed around the corners from the ghosts. Now, because the arcade version has a different resolution display, Glenn programmed the game to scroll up or down depending on where your character was on the screen. I must say it works really well. As you play the game, you don't even notice it. It's very smooth and it just works. For the beta version Glenn sent me, I must say it was excellent. Only thing I noticed is a little bit of flicking from the gimme chip while the game was running. This is, of course, all fixed now in the final release version. When I updated to the final release version, another thing that impressed me was the game option screen Glenn put in. The background graphic is super awesome high-res and perfect for picking game options. Well, there you have it, the real arcade version of Pac-Man for your CoCo 3. Go give it a spin and see how many cutscenes you can make it to. One last thing I'd like to mention here before I go. As Boise mentioned during the interview, it blows my mind this can be done on the CoCo 3. To have a real arcade version of Pac-Man and Sockmaster's Donkey Kong with no special hardware required. It just goes to show how powerful our CoCo really is when it's left in the hands of super talented programmers. When I read Glenn's blog site web address called Nowhere Man, I thought to myself, nowhere? This guy is definitely somewhere with those programming skills, and he's right here in the community. Keep up the great work, Glenn. Looking forward to your future projects. Just before we end this podcast, I'm going to leave you with this special song. Compliments to Boise Pete for finding this in his archives.
I finally got to talk to Kevin. They handed me the phone, and I said, "Hello, darling. It's been a long time since you worked on level 2 OS 9. But I'm begging you now, please hear my plea. Kevin, darling, set the upgrade free." Well, I spoke to Kent Meyer today. Mark Griffith, he gave his okay. Bill Dickhouse said that the contract was dead. It expired back in '93. So I'm leaving it all up to you. And you know what I hope you will do. So I'm begging you now, please hear my plea. Kevin, darling, set the upgrade free. Last night, as I sat by the screen, I must have been having a dream. For what did I see on the old CRT but the words OS9 level 3. So I'm leaving it all up to you. And you know what I hope you will do. So I'm begging you now, please hear my plea. Kevin, darling, set the upgrade free. So I'm begging you now, please hear my plea. Kevin, darling, set the upgrade free.
Well, we have now reached the end of episode 27. We hope you all enjoyed this episode. I'd like to thank our host John Linville for making it through another huge set of news articles and publishing another awesome tech segment. Those news articles are definitely not easy, with having to research, talk, and index catalog all of them. I also like to thank Myro for his support on being a part of this podcast and making all those hilarious commercials and bumpers. A big thanks goes out to Glenn Hewlett for giving us some of his time to record an interview and hear the latest on his recent Pac-Man game. Last but not least, thank you all for listening and supporting us each month. You should all have enough to keep busy for a month now. Write up some fun basic programs to burn onto a ROM card, and when you're tired coding, you can play arcade version of Pac-Man. Until next month, happy cocoing and Coco forever.